Hey guys, tonight we begin with something darker than your childhood closet, and colder than the side of the bed your partner refuses to share. Medieval orphanhood. Not the Annie kind. Not the plucky street urchin who befriends a nobleman kind. I mean actual medieval orphans, alone, freezing and trying to survive winters, that would make a polar bear reconsider its life choices. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I'm guessing it's past midnight and you're avoiding thinking about tomorrow. Now, dim those lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that gentle background hum. Get cozy under your blankets, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered how a child survived medieval winter without parents? Was there an orphanage that actually fed you, or was it more like a storage facility for tiny humans? Did anyone teach you how to avoid freezing to death? Or was that just something you figured out after losing a few toes? Could you beg for food without getting arrested, beaten, or worse? Would you last one night sleeping in a doorway when the temperature drops below freezing and your only blanket is a stolen burlap sack? And what about illness? Could a medieval orphan survive a simple cough, or was that basically a death sentence? How did you find shelter when every door was locked and every face turned away? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1320 and you're 8 years old. Your parents died 3 weeks ago, plague. Probably, or maybe just bad luck and a rotted turnip. You have no home, no family, and winter is coming. The church bells are ringing, but they're not ringing for you. Good luck. The first thing you notice when you wake up is the cold. Not the kind of cold where you pull up an extra blanket. The kind of cold that makes your bones ache, your fingers go numb, and your breath hang in the air like tiny ghosts. You're curled up in a doorway, pressed against a stone wall that's somehow colder than the air itself. There's no one to wake you gently, no parent to stoke a fire or hand you a bowl of warm porridge. There's just you, alone, and the creeping realization that if you don't move soon, the cold might win. Your body is stiff. Every joint protests as you try to unfold yourself from the tight ball you'd curled into during the night. It's a survival position. One you didn't learn from anyone. Your body just knew. Make yourself small. Conserve heat. Protect your vital organs. It's the same instinct that makes animals burrow into the earth when winter comes. Except you don't have a burrow. You have a doorway. And the stone step beneath you has stolen every bit of warmth your body tried to generate through the night. You blink, trying to clear the fog from your mind. The sky above is that particular shade of grey that tells you dawn has arrived, though the sun hasn't bothered to show its face yet. Not that it matters much. Medieval winter sun is a liar anyway. It shows up looking all bright and hopeful, then provides absolutely zero warmth. It's like your friend who says they'll help you move but only shows up after all the heavy lifting is done. Around you, the city is beginning to stir. You can hear the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the creak of shutters being pushed open, the sharp voice of a merchant yelling at his apprentice. Normal people are starting their normal days. They have homes to leave, fires to return to, families waiting with breakfast. You have none of those things. What you have is this doorway, the clothes on your back, and the gnawing certainty that today will be just as hard as yesterday. You try to stand, but your legs aren't cooperating. They've gone beyond cold into that numb wooden stage where you're not entirely sure they still belong to you. You lean against the wall, that same freezing stone wall, and slowly work feeling back into your limbs. It hurts. The pins and needles sensation is almost worse than the numbness. Almost. At least pain means you're still alive. There's frost on the ground. You can see it sparkling in the weak morning light, coating the cobblestones like spilled salt. Your breath comes out in visible puffs, small clouds that disappear as quickly as they form. You wonder, not for the first time, if one morning you'll just stop breathing out those clouds. If one morning you'll wake up, or rather you won't wake up. And that'll be that. Frozen solid like a forgotten bucket of water left outside. It's a cheerful thought to start your day with, really. Nothing quite like contemplating your own mortality before the sun's even properly up. But that's orphan life in medieval winter. Every morning is a small victory. Every moment you're still breathing is one more moment the cold hasn't claimed you. You look down at yourself. Your tunic is damp from the moisture in the air, Maybe from lying on the cold stone, maybe from the light frost that settled on everything during the night, including you. The fabric is stiff and uncomfortable, clinging to your skin in all the wrong ways. Your feet, wrapped in their pathetic rags, are so cold they've stopped hurting. That's either a very good sign or a very bad one. You're not sure which. You're 8 years old. You're not supposed to be a medical expert on frostbite. The doorway you've claimed for the night isn't really yours. None of them are. You're just borrowing space that no one else wanted badly enough to fight you for. It's the entrance to a cooper's shop, and you chose it because the overhang above provides maybe 6 inches of extra coverage from wind and rain. 6 inches. That's the difference between a good sleeping spot and a terrible one when you're living on the streets. You're basically shopping for real estate based on minor architectural features. Location, location, location. But now the cooper will be opening his shop soon, and when he does, he's not going to be thrilled to find a small, dirty orphan blocking his doorway. Some merchants are kind. Some just step over you. Others kick. You've learned to wake up early enough to move before finding out which type you're dealing with. It's like medieval Russian roulette, except instead of a gun, it's a boot, and instead of one chamber being loaded, it's about half of them. You force yourself to move, peeling away from the stone step like a piece of parchment stuck to a desk. Everything hurts. Your back aches from the hard surface. Your shoulders are tight from being hunched against the cold all night. Your stomach stopped hurting from hunger sometime around midnight, and now just feels hollow, like someone scooped out your insides and forgot to put them back. There's no morning routine, no stretching in bed, no stumbling to the bathroom, no checking your phone to see what you missed overnight. You don't brush your teeth because you don't have teeth brushing supplies, and honestly, dental hygiene is pretty low on your priority list when you're trying not to freeze to death. You don't wash your face because water is freezing cold, and you're already cold enough. Thank you very much. You don't change clothes because you don't have other clothes. You just exist. You wake up, you stand up, and you start moving because movement means warmth and stillness means death. It's that simple, that brutal. The street is starting to fill with people now. A woman hurries past with a basket, not even glancing your way. A man leading a donkey cart gives you a look. Not unkind, not kind either. Just acknowledgement that you're there. A small obstacle to navigate around. You're part of the urban furniture now. Just another fixture of the medieval cityscape, like the water troughs and the piles of garbage. And the thing is, you're not unique. There are other orphans waking up in other doorways all over the city. Hundreds of you, maybe thousands, all starting your days the same way. Cold, hungry, alone, and trying to figure out how to survive the next 24 hours. You're not special. You're not the protagonist of some heartwarming tale where the plucky orphan overcomes all odds. You're just a kid whose parents died, and now you're one bad week away from dying too. But here's the thing. You're still here. You made it through another night. The cold didn't win. Not yet. And as you shuffle away from the doorway trying to work warmth back into your frozen limbs, you're already thinking ahead. Where can you beg today? What merchants might be feeling generous? Is there a church service you can slip into for an hour of relative warmth? Because this is your life now. Every morning is the same. Wake up cold. Wake up alone. Wake up and immediately start the exhausting work of surviving. No parent to help you. No home to return to. Just you, the freezing air, and the question that follows you everywhere. Will you make it through another day? So far, the answer has been yes. But medieval winter is long, and you're very, very small. Let's talk about shelter, or rather, the complete lack of it. Medieval cities didn't have orphanages on every corner. In fact, most towns didn't have orphanages at all. If your parents died, you were expected to figure it out yourself, preferably somewhere that didn't make the townspeople feel guilty. So where did orphans sleep? Doorways, if they were lucky. Church porches, if the priest was feeling charitable. Alleyways, stables, under market stalls, inside barrels, beneath bridges, anywhere that offered even the slightest protection from wind, rain, and the judgment of passing strangers. The concept of home becomes very flexible when you're an orphan. It's not a place with 4 walls and a roof anymore. It's any spot where you can curl up for a few hours without dying or getting arrested. And trust me, both are real possibilities. The bar for acceptable sleeping accommodations drops so low it's practically underground. Did the wind only hit you from 3 directions instead of 4? Luxury! Could you almost, kind of if you squinted, call it shelter? That's a 5-star establishment right there. Doorways are prime real estate in the medieval orphan housing market. A good doorway has a deep recess, maybe a slight overhang, and ideally belongs to a shop that doesn't open at the crack of dawn. You learn which merchants are early risers and which ones like to sleep in. The baker? Up at 3 a.m, so his doorway is useless unless you enjoy being stepped on while it's still dark. The candlemaker? Civilized hours. He doesn't open until well after sunrise. That's the kind of information you trade with other orphans like it's currency, because in a way, it is. But doorways have competition. There are only so many to go around, and not every orphan is content to share. The bigger kids claim the best spots, and if you're small, which you are, you get whatever's left. Sometimes that means a doorway that's barely a doorway, more like a slight indentation in a wall that provides the architectural equivalent of thoughts and prayers. But you take it anyway because the alternative is sleeping completely exposed in the middle of the street, and that's how you wake up robbed, beaten, or not at all. Church porches sound ideal, right? You'd think the house of God would be the safest place for an orphan to spend the night. And sometimes it is. Some churches have covered porches with stone benches, and if the priest is kind, he'll pretend not to notice you huddled there. You might even get lucky and have him leave the door unlocked on particularly brutal nights, letting you slip inside where it's marginally warmer and significantly less windy. Those priests are rare. Most lock the doors tight and tell you to move along because apparently God's house has office hours. Then there are the churches with less charitable leadership, the ones where the priest sees you as a stain on his holy property, a visible reminder of poverty that makes the wealthy parishioners uncomfortable. He'll chase you off with a broom or worse, call the guards. Nothing says, love thy neighbour, quite like having a child arrested for sleeping on church steps. But that's medieval Christianity for you, very concerned with the concept of charity, less concerned with the actual practice of it. Stables are another option, and honestly, they're not terrible. Yes, you're sleeping in literal horse manure, but hear me out, it's warm. Animal body heat is real, and when you're freezing, you stop being picky about your roommates. Horses, cows, goats, they don't judge. They don't kick you out. Well, sometimes they kick you, but not for being poor. That's just horse behaviour. The downside is that stable owners don't love finding orphans bedded down with their livestock. They worry you'll steal something or spook the animals, so you have to sneak in after dark and leave before dawn, like some kind of medieval home invader, except the home is a barn and you're not stealing anything except warmth. Market stalls offer temporary refuge during the day, but become available at night once the merchants pack up and go home. You can crawl under the wooden platforms and make yourself small in the space between the ground and the boards above. It's cramped, dirty, and smells like rotting vegetables, but it blocks the wind. You're basically living in the crawl space of medieval commerce. The only problem is that you're not alone down there. Rats love market stalls. They're there for the dropped food, the spilled grain, the general chaos of edible refuse. So you share your sleeping space with rodents who are, quite frankly, better fed than you are. Some orphans get creative. Barrels, for instance. Empty wine barrels, ale barrels, barrels that used to hold salted fish. If it's hollow and you can fit inside, it's a potential bedroom. It's like being a medieval hermit crab, claiming empty shells wherever you find them. The benefit is that a barrel provides genuine protection from the elements. The downside is that it's a barrel. You can't stretch out. You can't really move. You just curl up inside and hope nobody rolls you down a hill as a joke. Or worse, fills you back up with something while you're sleeping inside. That would be awkward. Bridges are popular because they offer overhead coverage, and usually some structural elements you can tuck yourself behind. The problem is that bridges are also popular with every other person who needs free shelter. Beggars, criminals, drunks who couldn't make it home, and other orphans. It's medieval urban camping and not the fun kind. You're packed in with strangers in the dark, listening to people cough, curse, and occasionally fight over who gets the spot closest to the wall. It's like the worst sleepover ever, except nobody brought snacks and everyone might have the plague. Alleyways are a last resort. They offer almost no protection from weather, and are basically crime corridors after dark. But when every other spot is taken, You squeeze into whatever narrow passage you can find between buildings and hope for the best. The best in this case being that you don't get mugged, assaulted, or used as target practice by drunk nobles looking for entertainment. Medieval cities didn't have streetlights, so alleyways at night are pitch black. You can't see threats coming. You just hear footsteps and pray they keep walking past your hiding spot. The real estate game changes with the seasons too. Summer sleeping spots are easier to find because you're not in immediate danger of freezing to death. You can sleep almost anywhere, under carts, in gardens, on church steps, and probably survive until morning. But winter is cutthroat. Every sheltered spot becomes contested territory. The competition is fierce, and the stakes are literally life and death. You learn to find your spot early, defend it if necessary, and never, ever give it up until morning forces you out. And here's the thing that really drives home how bleak this is. You don't get to stay. Even if you find a perfect spot, dry, sheltered, relatively safe, you can't claim it permanently. You can't put up a sign that says, "This doorway is occupied, please respect my space." Every night is a fresh scramble to find somewhere to sleep. Every morning, you're evicted by circumstance. You're not homeless in the modern sense where you might have a tent or a regular spot under an overpass. You're nomadic, constantly moving, never secure. So when people talk about medieval orphans, they picture Oliver Twist-style orphanages with cruel headmasters, but at least beds and walls. The reality is so much worse. There are no beds, there are barely walls, just a rotating series of semi-sheltered spots that you occupy briefly before shuffling along. Always cold, always uncomfortable, and always one bad night away from not waking up at all. Welcome to the medieval housing crisis. Population, every orphan in the city. Amenities, none. Vacancy rate, somehow still 0. Your wardrobe consists of exactly one outfit and it's falling apart. A thin, scratchy tunic that might have belonged to your father, or maybe it was stolen from a washing line last month. You can't quite remember. It's too big in some places, too small in others, and it smells like a combination of smoke, dirt, and despair. There are holes in the elbows and a tear along the hem that gets longer every day. Your feet are wrapped in rags because shoes are a luxury reserved for people who have homes, and you are decidedly not one of those people. The fabric of your tunic is rough wool, the kind that was scratchy when it was new and has only gotten worse with time, dirt, and constant wear. It's like being hugged by a very aggressive hedge. Every movement reminds you that you're wearing basically a wearable torture device. Modern people complain about tags in their shirts. You're wearing an entire shirt made of what feels like tags. But you can't take it off because it's the only thing standing between your skin and the freezing air, so you and the scratchy tunic are stuck with each other, until one of you disintegrates completely. The tunic used to be brown, or maybe grey. Now it's a colour that doesn't have a name, something between mud and I've given up. There are stains whose origins you don't want to think about too hard. Some are yours, blood from a scraped knee, dirt from sleeping on the ground. Others are mysteries. Did your father get these stains? Did the person he got it from? Is this tunic older than you are? Quite possibly. Medieval clothing gets passed down until it literally can't be passed anymore, until it's so full of holes that it's more air than fabric. And speaking of holes, you've got a collection. The elbows went first because that's what you lean on when you're begging or sleeping on hard surfaces. Now there are matching holes that get bigger every week. You try to tie them closed with a bit of thread you found. But your sewing skills are exactly what you'd expect from an 8-year-old orphan with no one to teach them, which is to say, non-existent. The result looks like a drunk spider tried to build a web and gave up halfway through. The hem is unravelling too, slowly working its way up your tunic like some kind of textile disease. Every time you catch it on something, a nail, a rough stone, another orphan's grabbing hand, it gets a little worse. At this rate, by next winter you'll be wearing a shirt that ends at your ribs, which would be breezy, fashionable in absolutely no culture ever, and a guaranteed way to freeze to death even faster. Under the tunic you've got nothing. No undershirt, no undergarments, nothing. Underwear is for people who have more than one set of clothes. You're not those people. It's just skin and scratchy wool creating a constant friction situation that's about as comfortable as it sounds. You're basically being gently sanded down every time you move. It's exfoliating in the worst possible way. Your feet are their own disaster. You've wrapped them in strips of cloth scavenged from various sources, a torn piece of someone's discarded shirt, a bit of rag from the market, whatever you could find. The wrapping is uneven, lumpy, and provides roughly the same amount of protection as wrapping your feet in cobwebs. Every sharp stone, every piece of frozen mud, every splinter on the medieval streets goes straight through to your skin. You've stopped noticing the small cuts. They're just part of a life now. Your feet haven't been pain-free in so long you've forgotten what that feels like. Real shoes? Those are a fantasy. Leather boots with actual soles and laces and everything. You've seen merchants wearing them, nobles walking by in their fancy footwear that probably costs more than you'd see in your entire lifetime. Sometimes you stare at people's shoes instead of their faces. It's easier, less likely to be interpreted as begging or threatening. You just gaze down at these miraculous foot-covering devices and wonder what it must be like to walk without feeling every pebble, every freezing puddle, every microscopic texture of the medieval street. The cloth wrapping comes undone constantly. You stop every few hours to rewrap your feet, trying to keep at least some barrier between you and the ground. It's like a never-ending battle you're slowly losing. The fabric is wearing through. It's getting wetter and dirtier and less effective by the day. Eventually you'll need to find replacement rags, which means either stealing them or finding some generous soul who'll take pity on your bleeding feet. Neither is guaranteed. In winter, your clothing situation goes from bad to catastrophic. That single thin tunic is supposed to protect you from temperatures that would make modern people flee indoors and crank up the heating. You have no coat, no cloak, nothing to layer. Some orphans are lucky enough to steal or beg a second piece of clothing, a ragged cloak, an oversized shirt to wear under their tunic. And those kids are basically the fashion elite of the orphan world. You're not one of them. You have your tunic and your increasingly theoretical foot wrappings. That's it. You try to compensate by stuffing your tunic with straw or dried grass for extra insulation. It works, sort of. It makes you look like a lumpy scarecrow that escaped from a field, and the straw pokes you constantly, and it doesn't stay in place, but it does trap a tiny bit of body heat. You become a walking, very uncomfortable haystack. When you sleep, pieces of straw stick out of your collar and sleeves like you're slowly transforming into a harvest decoration. But desperation makes you creative, and if looking ridiculous keeps you alive, you'll look as ridiculous as necessary. The smell is another issue entirely. You haven't washed your clothes in, well, ever. You haven't washed yourself in almost as long. Water is cold, soap doesn't exist in your world, and honestly, staying dirty provides a tiny bit of extra insulation. It's like a grime blanket. Disgusting? Yes. Practical? Also yes. The medieval world runs on a different hygiene standard anyway. Everyone smells. You just smell worse. Much worse. You've reached a level of unwashed that would make a modern person's eyes water from 10 feet away. But here's the thing. Your clothes aren't just falling apart from age and wear. They're falling apart because you're growing. You're 8 years old. Your body's trying to get bigger despite the malnutrition and constant cold. That tunic that might have fit your father, or the person you stole it from, is now actively fighting against your shoulders. Your lengthening arms, your torso that insists on expanding. Every day the fabric strains a little more. Seams that were barely holding on are now giving up entirely. And you can't just get new clothes. There's no medieval Target where you can pop in for a new tunic. Clothes are expensive, handmade, and precious. Families hold on to clothing until it literally disintegrates. Then they repurpose the scraps. As an orphan, you're at the absolute bottom of the clothing chain. You get what no one else wants, what's too damaged for anyone else to wear, what's been rejected by everyone who came before you. Sometimes you see other children, children with parents, with homes, wearing clean tunics, proper shoes, even hats or mittens in winter. You watch them walk by, warm and comfortable, and you try not to feel bitter. But it's hard not to notice that they have 3 tunics while you have one. They have shoes while you have optimistic rags. They'll go home tonight and change into sleep clothes while you'll sleep in the same outfit you're wearing now because it's the same outfit you wear every minute of every day. Your clothes are supposed to protect you from the elements. Instead, they're barely putting up a fight. They're losing to the cold, the rain, the constant wear, and time itself. And when they finally fall apart completely, which feels inevitable, you'll have to start over, scrounging for replacement pieces, hoping to find something, anything, to cover yourself with before winter kills you. Fashion in the medieval orphan world isn't about style, it's about survival. and right now you're dressed for failure. If there's one thing you know better than cold, it's hunger. Not the "I skipped lunch" kind of hunger. The kind that gnaws at your insides like a rabid animal. The kind that makes you dizzy when you stand up too fast. The kind that turns every waking moment into a desperate search for food. You haven't had a full meal in weeks, maybe months. Time blurs when your stomach is eating itself. Breakfast isn't a meal, it's a fantasy. Lunch is whatever you can beg, steal, or scavenge. And dinner? That's the thing you dream about while shivering in a doorway. The hunger starts as a hollow feeling in your belly, a gentle reminder that you should probably eat something. But after a few days of not eating, it transforms into something else entirely. It becomes a constant gnawing presence that dominates every thought. You stop thinking about toys or games or what life was like when your parents were alive. You think about food. Only food. What it tastes like, what it smells like, where you might find it, who might give you some. Your stomach makes noises that would be embarrassing if you had any dignity left to protect. Growls, gurgles, sounds that echo in the quiet moments and announce to everyone around you that you're starving. It's like your intestines are having a very vocal argument with the rest of your body about the distinct lack of food situation. Sometimes the noises are so loud that people turn to stare and you try to laugh it off or ignore it, but mostly you just feel ashamed because your body is literally screaming its desperation to anyone within earshot. The dizziness is worse. When you've been lying down or sitting for a while and then suddenly stand up, the world tilts. Black spots dance across your vision. Your ears ring. For a moment, you're not entirely sure which direction is up. It's your body's way of saying, "Hey, remember how we need food to function? Yeah, we really, really need that." You learn to stand up slowly, to grab onto walls, to wait for the spinning to stop before you try to walk. Because falling down in the middle of a medieval street is a great way to get trampled by a horse cart or robbed by someone who realizes you're too weak to fight back. Your body starts eating itself. You don't understand the science, nobody does in 1320, but you can feel it happening. Your arms are getting thinner, your ribs are becoming more prominent, visible through your skin like the bars of a cage. Your face is gaunt, your cheeks hollow. You look in puddles sometimes, catch your reflection in still water, and barely recognize the skeletal child staring back. You look like a ghost. You feel like one too. The worst part about hunger isn't the physical pain, though that's terrible enough. It's the mental obsession. Food becomes the only thing that matters. You walk past a bakery and the smell of fresh bread hits you like a physical force. Your mouth waters, your stomach clenches. You stand there frozen, just breathing in that warm, yeasty aroma like it's the most valuable thing in the world. Because in that moment, it is. You'd trade anything. Your dignity, your safety, your future, for one of those loaves. Just one. You develop a kind of food radar. You can spot potential meals from incredible distances. A merchant eating an apple on the corner. You track the apple, watching for the moment he might toss the core. Someone carrying a basket of turnips. You follow at a distance, hoping one might fall. A tavern door opening, releasing the smell of cooking meat. You drift toward it like a moth to flame, even though you know they'll chase you away the moment you get too close. Medieval cities are full of food, theoretically. Markets overflow with produce, meat, bread, cheese. Taverns serve hot meals. Nobles feast on multiple courses. But none of that food is for you. You're surrounded by abundance you can't access, like standing outside a warm house in winter and pressing your face against the frozen window. You can see it, smell it, almost taste it, but there's an invisible wall between you and survival. And that wall is called money and social class and not being a worthless orphan. You learn what's edible through trial and error, and some of those errors are memorable. Mouldy bread? You eat it anyway. The mould won't kill you. Probably. Rotting vegetables from the midden heap? You cut away the worst parts and chew the rest. Bones that other people have already gnawed clean. You gnaw them again, cracking them open to suck out the marrow if there's any left. Things fall on the street. A bit of pie, a crust of bread, something unidentifiable, and you grab it before anyone else can. You don't ask questions, you don't worry about where it's been, you just eat. There's a hierarchy of desperation. In the beginning, you only eat things that look relatively food-like. But as the weeks wear on and the hunger gets worse, your standards drop. Way down. You eat things you would have been disgusted by a month ago. Scraps you would have fed to dogs. Food that's touched the filthy street, that's been rained on, that's been partially eaten by rats. You tell yourself it's just protein, just calories, just fuel to keep your body functioning one more day. Other orphans are your competition. You watch them, and they watch you, all of you circling the same potential food sources like scavenger birds. When a merchant drops something, it's a race. The fastest child gets the prize. You've won sometimes, you've lost more often. Being small and weak from malnutrition isn't great for competitive food grabbing. The bigger kids always have the advantage, and you've learned to pick your battles. Sometimes it's smarter to wait for them to take the obvious scraps and then sneak in later for the bits they missed. You think about food constantly. When you're trying to fall asleep, you imagine meals. Not fancy noble feasts, just simple, filling food. A bowl of porridge, a hunk of cheese, an entire loaf of bread that you don't have to share with anyone. In your fantasies, you eat slowly, savouring every bite, never worrying about where your next meal will come from. It's almost painful, these food dreams. You wake up with your mouth watering and your stomach cramping, and the cruel reality that you have nothing to eat today either. The hunger affects everything. You can't run as fast as you used to. You can't think clearly. Simple decisions become overwhelming because your brain is starving too, desperately trying to function without the fuel it needs. You forget things. You lose track of time. You sit down to rest for a minute and suddenly it's hours later, and you've lost precious daylight that you could have spent searching for food. Sometimes adults notice. They see your skeletal frame, your desperate eyes, the way you stare at their food like it's the answer to every prayer you've ever whispered. Some of them feel bad for a moment. They might toss you a scrap, a crust, something small that makes them feel charitable, without actually costing them anything significant. You take it gratefully, even though you know it's barely enough to keep you alive. Any food is better than no food, but most people don't notice, or they notice and don't care. You're just another hungry orphan in a city full of them. Background noise in the medieval soundscape. They've learned to look right through you, to step around you, to continue their day as if you don't exist. And that might be worse than the hunger itself. The realization that most people would rather let you starve than be mildly inconvenienced. Your body starts doing strange things. Your hair is falling out in patches. Your gums bleed when you touch them. You bruise easily, great purple marks appearing on your arms and legs from the smallest bump. You're malnourished in ways that have actual medical names. Scurvy, rickets, kwashiorkor. But you just know that your body is failing. Piece by piece, system by system, your body is shutting down from lack of food. And the cruelest part, you're always thinking about eating. Even when you manage to find something, a crust of bread, a handful of scraps, it's never enough. You eat it in seconds, barely tasting it, and immediately your body demands more. The hunger never leaves. It just quiets down for a moment before roaring back stronger than before. It's an endless, exhausting cycle that you can't escape. You watch dogs eating better than you, actual dogs, gnawing on bones their owners toss them, licking out bowls, getting table scraps. You're jealous of dogs. That's where you are now, envying animals because at least they're someone's responsibility. At least someone makes sure they eat. Hunger isn't just uncomfortable. It's not just painful. It's consuming. It takes over your entire existence until you're not really a child anymore. You're just a walking, desperate need for food, counting the hours until maybe, possibly, if you're lucky, you find something to eat that keeps you alive one more day. Begging isn't as simple as holding out your hand and looking sad. There's strategy involved, politics even. You need to find the right spot, somewhere with foot traffic but not so busy that the guards notice you. You need to look pitiful but not diseased, hungry but not threatening. And you need to perfect the art of the pleading face. Big eyes, trembling lip, just enough tears to seem genuine but not so many that people think you're faking it. Some days you get a crust of bread, some days you get kicked. Location is everything. You can't just plop yourself down anywhere and expect charity to rain from the heavens. The spot outside the church, prime real estate, already claimed by an older beggar who'll chase you off with a stick if you try to encroach on his territory. The marketplace? Good foot traffic, but the merchants hate beggars because apparently we're bad for business. Nothing says buy my turnips quite like a starving child sitting 3 feet away, reminding customers of mortality and social inequality. You learn through trial and error, which is a polite way of saying you try different spots until someone either gives you food or threatens to break your fingers. The best spots are near places where people are feeling generous or guilty. Outside the baker's shop right when the morning bread comes out. Excellent, because people with warm bread are already in a good mood. Near the tavern at midday. Risky, because drunk people are unpredictable. They might give you a coin or they might throw a bottle at your head. Both have happened. The space outside the butcher's shop is complicated. On one hand, people buying meat clearly have money. On the other hand, they're already spending money and aren't thrilled about being asked for more. Plus, the butcher himself is territorial about his storefront and has been known to dump buckets of blood water on beggars who linger too long. You've learned to position yourself just far enough away to catch customers before they enter, but not so close that you're within bucket throwing range. It's a delicate geographical calculation. Your appearance matters. You need to look pathetic enough to inspire charity, but not so wretched that people cross the street to avoid you. It's a fine line. Dirty? Yes, but not covered in open sores. Thin? Absolutely, but not actively dying in front of them. Ragged clothes? Essential. But you can't look like you might be contagious or criminally dangerous. You're going for poor, unfortunate child who deserves Christian charity, not plague vector who might rob you. You've practiced your begging face in puddle reflections. Big eyes. That's crucial. You make them as wide as possible, staring up at people with an expression that says, I am a small, harmless child who needs help. The trembling lip is advanced technique. Too much, and you look like you're having a seizure. Too little, and you just look mildly annoyed. You aim for a gentle quiver that suggests you're bravely holding back tears but might break down at any moment. Sometimes you add a small, pathetic cough. Not too aggressive. You don't want them thinking you have consumption. Just a little cough that says, I'm unwell but not dangerously so, please help. It's performing, really. You're an actor on the medieval street stage. And your survival depends on your performance quality. No pressure. The words matter too. Please, sir, a scrap of bread works better than give me food. You've learned to be polite, deferential, non-threatening. You call men sir and women mistress, even though half of them are barely better off than you. You make yourself small, humble, grateful for even the possibility of charity. You've perfected a voice that's quiet, but not too quiet. Pitiful, but not whiny. It's exhausting, constantly modulating your presentation to appeal to strangers' better nature. Sometimes you target specific people. The merchant's wife who dresses well but not ostentatiously, she's your best bet. Rich enough to have food to spare, but not so wealthy that she's forgotten what poverty looks like. Actual nobles, forget it. They either don't see you or actively find your existence offensive. The middle-class artisans and small merchants, though, they're your target demographic. People who've worked for what they have and might remember their own hard times. You learn to read faces quickly. Is this person in a hurry? Don't bother, they'll walk right past. Do they look angry or stressed? Bad timing, you'll just catch their frustration. But someone walking slowly, maybe humming, looking relaxed. That's your opportunity. You position yourself in their path, not blocking them, never blocking, just strategically present. You make eye contact at exactly the right moment. Too early and they'll have time to look away. Too late and you've missed your window. The approach is delicate. You don't grab at people. That's how you get hit. You don't follow them. That's how you get accused of being a pickpocket. You just stand there, hand out, eyes wide, the picture of needy innocence. And hope. Hope is a big part of begging. You hope they'll stop. Hope they'll reach into their purse. Hope they'll see you as a human child instead of an obstacle. When someone actually gives you something, you perform gratitude. Thank you, bless you, God keep you, mistress. You clutch whatever they've given you. A crust of bread, a bruised apple, a single coin if you're incredibly lucky. Like it's the most precious thing you've ever held. Because it is. You bow slightly, you smile through your hunger, and you make them feel good about their charity. Because if they feel good about it, they might give again. Maybe not to you, but to some other desperate child. And that's how the system perpetuates itself. But rejection is more common than charity. Most people walk right past. They've developed a kind of selective blindness to beggars, a skill that lets them navigate the medieval city without constantly confronting poverty. You're furniture to them, part of the urban landscape they've learned to ignore. Some people at least have the decency to look guilty as they pass. Others get angry, like your existence is a personal insult. "Get a job," they mutter, as if there are jobs for 8-year-old orphans just lying around waiting to be claimed. Then there are the ones who get physical, a shove, a kick, a cuff across the head. "Move along, beggar rat." You learn to roll with it, to protect your head with your arms, to scramble away before they can really hurt you. Getting beaten for begging is just part of the job description. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means you asked the wrong person on the wrong day. You compete with other beggars too. There are unwritten rules about territory, about who gets which spot and when. Break those rules and you'll find yourself in a fight with another desperate child who's just as hungry as you are. Sometimes you form temporary alliances. Two small beggars working together can cover more ground, watch each other's backs, share information about which merchants are feeling generous. But alliances are fragile when everyone is starving. The worst days are when you beg all day and get nothing. Absolutely nothing. Hours of standing, performing, hoping, and all you have to show for it are sore feet and empty hands. Those are the days you start to wonder if you're becoming invisible, if you've crossed some threshold where you're so beneath notice that you might as well not exist. Those are the days you understand why some beggar children turn to theft. At least stealing is active. At least you're taking control of your survival instead of relying on the mercy of people who have none. Religious festivals are golden opportunities. People leaving church feel virtuous and guilty in equal measure. Perfect conditions for charity. You position yourself near the church doors as services let out, looking as pathetic as humanly possible. "Alms for the love of God," you whisper, because invoking God makes it harder for them to refuse. They've just spent an hour being told to help the poor, and here you are, conveniently poor and right in their path. Some of them give just to ease their conscience. You don't care why they give, only that they do. Market days bring crowds, which means more opportunities but also more competition and more danger. Guards patrol market days more heavily because that's when pickpockets and thieves come out. You have to be careful not to look too strategic, too calculating. You're just a poor child, remember? Not a criminal. Even though the line between begging and theft is sometimes paper thin, and you've crossed it more than once when begging wasn't enough, you develop a thick skin because you have to. When someone spits at you, calls you worthless vermin, tells you to go die in a ditch, you can't fall apart. You can't cry real tears because you need to save those for the performance. You just take it, nod, move to the next person, try again. Begging requires resilience that no child should need. But here you are, 8 years old, with the emotional armour of someone who's learned that rejection is just background noise. By the end of a successful begging day, you might have a handful of crusts, maybe a small coin, perhaps a bruised piece of fruit. By the end of an unsuccessful one, you have nothing but tired legs and the growing fear that tomorrow will be even harder. Because that's the thing about begging. It gets harder the weaker you get. The more starved you look, the more people assume you're diseased or dying, and nobody wants to waste charity on a lost cause. So you perform. Every single day you wake up and perform the role of deserving poor child for an audience that mostly doesn't care. And you do it because the alternative is not eating at all. The church is supposed to help orphans, that's what everyone says. God looks after the meek, the poor, the fatherless, right? In theory, yes. In practice, it's complicated. Some priests are kind. They'll give you a bowl of thin soup or let you sleep in the back of the church on particularly brutal nights. Others see you as a nuisance, a reminder of suffering they'd rather not acknowledge. And then there are the ones who offer help with strings attached, work in exchange for food, labour in exchange for shelter, or worse, things no child should ever have to give. The church looms over the medieval city like it looms over medieval life. Massive, inescapable, theoretically benevolent. Its bells mark the hours, its presence dominates the town square, and its teachings tell everyone that caring for orphans is a sacred duty. Jesus said something about "suffer the little children," which you've heard quoted more times than you've actually received help. Funny how that works. Lots of scripture about charity, not quite as much actual charity. You approach the church with a mixture of hope and wariness, like approaching a large dog who might lick your face or bite it off. You never quite know what you're going to get. The building itself is intimidating. Thick stone walls, heavy wooden doors, stained glass windows that turn sunlight into fragments of colour you can't touch or feel. It's beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with your life. Beauty doesn't feed you, but desperation makes you knock on those doors anyway. Some priests are genuine in their compassion. Father Benedict, for instance, keeps a pot of thin vegetable soup near the church kitchen and doesn't ask questions when hungry children appear. He's old. His hands shake when he ladles the soup, and he whispers prayers over your head that you don't really understand but appreciate anyway because at least he sees you. At least he acknowledges you're human. Those priests are rare. When you find one, you memorize the church location, the service times, when he's most likely to have food to spare. Then there are the priests who help, but make sure you know it's an inconvenience. Father William gives out bread on Wednesdays, but accompanies each loaf with a lecture about idleness and sin. He seems to believe you're an orphan because of some moral failing, yours or your parents. God tests those he loves, he says, handing you a piece of bread so stale it could be used as a weapon. You nod, take the bread, and try not to point out that if God loves you this much, you'd hate to see what divine indifference looks like. These lectures are exhausting. You're 8 years old, starving, and some priest is explaining that poverty is a spiritual opportunity for growth, that suffering builds character, that you should be grateful for your hardships because they're bringing you closer to God. You want to scream that you'd rather be farther from God and closer to literally any food, but you don't because that's how you get thrown out with nothing. So you bow your head, look appropriately penitent, and endure the sermon before you can eat. Some churches have organised charity systems, alms for the poor, distributed on specific days, usually after Mass. You learn the schedule. Tuesdays at St. Catherine's, Fridays at Holy Trinity, Sundays pretty much everywhere if you can handle the crowd. You show up, you wait in line with the other desperate people, and you receive whatever they're giving out that day. Sometimes it's bread, sometimes it's thin soup. Once, memorably, it was a single dried fish that you had to split with 3 other orphans because apparently God's abundance has limits. The catch is you usually have to sit through the service first. Hours of Latin you don't understand, standing and kneeling and standing again, incense making your empty stomach even more nauseous. Your legs ache from standing. Your head spins from hunger. But you endure it because at the end there might be food. It's like the world's longest, most incomprehensible commercial before you get to the actual product. Then there are the monasteries and convents, religious institutions that sometimes take in orphans. Sometimes, if you're lucky, if they have room, if you seem salvageable, they're not running hotels for street children. They're running religious operations that occasionally include charity when it's convenient. You've heard stories of orphans taken in by monasteries, given food and shelter and education in exchange for helping with work and eventually joining the religious life. It sounds amazing. 3 meals a day, a bed, safety. It sounds like winning the medieval lottery. But getting accepted is nearly impossible. They don't want just any orphan. They want young ones who can be moulded, healthy ones who can work, and preferably ones who show some sign of religious calling or at least intelligence. You're too old to be easily trained, too weak from malnutrition to be useful for heavy labour, and frankly, you're not sure what a religious calling feels like when you're mainly just trying not to die, so you don't make the cut. Few orphans do. The darker side of church charity is the strings attached. Some priests offer food and shelter but expect work in return. Not fair work. The kind of work that would make labour laws weep if labour laws existed. You scrub stone floors until your hands bleed. You haul water from wells until your arms feel like they'll fall off. You do hours of backbreaking labour for a bowl of slop and the privilege of sleeping in a cold corner. It's exploitation dressed up as charity. And you can't refuse because the alternative is starving on the street. Worse are the priests who want other things. You're a child, vulnerable and alone, and some of these men see that vulnerability as opportunity. They offer special help, private meetings, extra food if you'll just come to their chambers after dark. You learn quickly which priests to avoid, which churches aren't safe. The other orphans whisper warnings. Don't go to St. Bartholomew's after sunset. Father Marcus isn't safe. You add it to your mental map of danger zones, another place you can't seek refuge even when you're desperate. The church also serves as a place of temporary warmth, even if you're not supposed to be there. You sneak in during the day sometimes when services aren't happening, just to sit in the quiet and feel the absence of wind. The stone walls block the cold better than any doorway. If you're careful, if you stay in the back and keep silent, you can stay for an hour or two before someone notices and chases you out. Those stolen moments of not quite warmth are precious. Some churches have charity boxes where people deposit coins for the poor. In theory, that money goes to help people like you. In practice, you never see it. The money gets counted by church officials, distributed according to systems you don't understand, and somehow never makes it to the actual starving orphans sleeping on the steps outside. You watch wealthy merchants drop coins in the box with flourishes of public generosity, and you wonder if they know their charity is being administratively processed into non-existence. The church orphanages, when they exist at all, are grim places. You've heard stories, rows of beds packed so tight you can barely move, brutal discipline for the smallest infractions, work schedules that rival adult labour, disease spreading through cramped quarters like wildfire. Some orphans swear the orphanage is worse than the streets. At least on the streets you're free, even if you're starving. At least you're not being beaten by a nun with a switch for failing to properly memorize your prayers. Religious holidays are complicated. On one hand, feast days mean people are feeling extra charitable, churches distribute more food, and there's a general sense that helping the poor is part of the celebration. Christmas, Easter, saints' feast days. These are your best chances for actual charity. On the other hand, these are also the days when churches are most crowded, most organised, and most likely to have guards keeping undesirables at a distance. You're not always welcome at the celebration of Christ's birth, apparently. Something about property values and keeping the riffraff out. You develop a complicated relationship with religion itself. Is God real? Does he care? If he cares, why are you starving? Why did your parents die? Why does the church that preaches charity practice it so selectively? These are heavy theological questions for an 8-year-old, but you're not living an 8-year-old's life. You're living a survival experiment, and God seems remarkably absent from the equation. Some orphans become deeply religious, finding comfort in the promise of heavenly reward for earthly suffering. They pray constantly, attend every service they can, genuinely believe that their hardship is temporary and heaven awaits. You envy their faith sometimes. It must be nice to believe that all this suffering has meaning, that someone up there is keeping score and you'll be rewarded later. You want to believe it. But it's hard to maintain faith when you're literally starving, and the people who claim to represent God keep stepping over you. The church bells ring throughout the day, marking hours, calling people to prayer, announcing events. They're beautiful in a way, these bells. Their sound carries across the entire city, a constant reminder that the church is here, watching, theoretically caring. But the bells don't feed you. They just remind you what time it is, how many hours until the next possible charity distribution, how long you've been hungry. In the end, the church is like everything else in medieval life. It might help you if you're lucky, if you find the right priest, if you show up on the right day, if you're the right kind of orphan. But it's not reliable. It's not guaranteed. The church talks a beautiful game about charity and compassion, but the reality is far messier, far more conditional, far more human than divine. So you approach each church with cautious hope, ready to accept whatever scraps of help they offer, while protecting yourself from the harm they might cause, because salvation and suffering aren't opposites in the medieval world. Sometimes they arrive in the same building, wearing the same robes, speaking the same prayers, and you're just trying to survive both. When begging fails and charity runs dry, you get creative. Medieval cities are full of food if you know where to look and aren't too concerned with things like ownership or hygiene. Market stalls at the end of the day sometimes have bruised fruit or vegetables too wilted to sell. Bakery alleyways have scraps, burnt ends of loaves tossed into the gutter. Tavern trash heaps have bones with bits of meat still clinging to them if you're fast enough to beat the dogs. And if you're really desperate, there's always the slop buckets behind the butcher's shop, though what's in there is anyone's guess. The end of market day is your golden hour. Merchants are tired, packing up their goods, and they don't want to haul rotten produce back home. You watch from a distance as they sort through their remaining stock, tossing aside anything too damaged or spoiled to sell tomorrow. That's your cue. You wait until they're distracted, then dart in and grab what you can. A half-rotten turnip? Yours. An apple with a massive bruise that's turned half the fruit to brown mush? Still better than nothing. You cut away the bad parts with a sharp rock and eat the rest, trying not to think about what might be growing in there. Sometimes the merchants see you and don't care. Sometimes they actually toss things your way deliberately, a small act of kindness that cost them nothing since they were throwing it out anyway. And sometimes they chase you off, yelling about thieving orphan rats ruining their livelihood. You never quite know which response you'll get, so you stay alert, ready to run at the first sign of aggression. Your survival depends on being faster than angry merchants wielding brooms. The bakery alley is both treasure and competition zone. Every bakery produces burnt loaves, misshaped bread, and crusty ends that aren't pretty enough to sell. These scraps get tossed out the back door, usually into the alley where pigs, dogs, and orphans compete for access. You've learned the bakery schedules, which ones throw out scraps in the morning, which ones wait until evening. You position yourself accordingly, trying to be first in line when the door opens and rejected bread comes flying out. The bread is often burnt black on one side, rock hard, or so misshapen it barely qualifies as bread anymore. You don't care. You've gnawed on things that would make modern health inspectors faint. The burnt parts actually aren't bad once you get used to the charcoal flavour. It's like someone carbonised your meal as a fun surprise. The hard bread requires strategy. You can't bite through it directly. You'll break your teeth, which you can't afford to lose because you need them for future food-eating endeavours. So you suck on it, softening it with spit. Or if you're near water, you dunk it until it's chewable. Taverns produce more garbage than almost anywhere else. Drunk people are wasteful people. They order food they don't finish, gnaw meat off bones but leave plenty behind, and generally discard half their meals because they're too focused on drinking to care about eating. All that waste goes somewhere, usually the midden heap behind the tavern. That's where you come in, picking through the disgusting pile like an archaeologist excavating an ancient civilization's trash. Except this civilization was drunk and it was yesterday. The bones are your primary target. Meat is precious, and even the scraps clinging to discarded bones represent more protein than you've had all week. You grab them quickly, before the dogs notice, because dogs are your main competition and they're not interested in sharing. You've been bitten more than once trying to wrestle a bone away from a tavern dog who feels very strongly about his claim to the garbage. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose and have a new wound to add to your collection. The butcher's slop bucket is legendary among orphans for being simultaneously the most disgusting and most calorie-dense food source available. This is where the butcher throws everything that can't be sold or used. Gristle, fat, organ scraps, bits of meat too small or strange to package, blood, and things you'd rather not identify. It all goes into a wooden bucket that sits behind the shop, fermenting in the sun, attracting flies, and generally existing as an affront to the concept of food. But when you're hungry enough, and you're always hungry enough, you'll reach into that bucket and pull out whatever your fingers find. Sometimes it's a chunk of fat that you can chew for the calories. Sometimes it's a piece of organ meat that's questionable but technically edible. Sometimes it's something that makes you gag, but you force it down anyway because your body needs fuel, and beggars literally cannot be choosers. You've become a culinary risk-taker by necessity, willing to eat things that would make your former, well-fed self vomit. Fallen fruit is seasonal treasure. In autumn, apple trees drop their harvest, and while most fruit gets collected, there's always some that rolls away or sits rotting in corners. You patrol the areas where fruit trees grow, in monastery gardens visible from the street, in wealthy courtyards you can peek into, near orchards on the outskirts of town. When you find a fallen apple, even if it's half-rotten and worm-eaten, it's Christmas. You eat around the bad parts, spit out the worms, and savour every remotely edible bite. The city's pigs are both competitors and inadvertent helpers. Pigs are allowed to roam the streets, eating garbage and keeping the city marginally cleaner. They're very good at finding food scraps, which means if you follow pigs, you'll eventually find food too. The trick is getting to it before the pig does, which requires speed and a willingness to literally wrestle a farm animal for lunch. You've done it. You're not proud, but you've definitely shoved a pig aside to grab something edible from its path. The pig was not amused. Grain sacks sometimes split open at the mill or market, spilling their contents onto the ground. Those precious grains, wheat, barley, oats, are worth more than gold to you. You drop to your knees and scrape up what you can, even the bits mixed with dirt and gravel. You separate out the stones as best you can, then eat the grain raw, chewing it into a paste. It's not bread, but it's grain, and grain is food, and food is life. You've become remarkably unsqueaky about eating things off the ground. Dirt is basically just extra minerals. Wells and water troughs sometimes have vegetables floating in them, dropped accidentally by people washing produce. You fish them out with your hands, ignoring the fact that this water is also used by animals and isn't exactly pristine. A carrot that's been floating in questionable water is still a carrot. You wash it off in cleaner water if you can find some, but mostly you just eat it and hope for the best. The monastery kitchen sometimes throws scraps over the wall: potato peelings, vegetable ends, stale bread from the monks' meals. It's not intentionally for orphans, but it lands outside the monastery walls, and that makes it fair game. You compete with other desperate people for these scraps, all of you hovering near the wall, waiting for something to come flying over. It's like the world's saddest, most depressing version of waiting for a concert t-shirt to be thrown into the crowd. You learn to identify edible plants growing in neglected corners, wild greens, herbs that have escaped from gardens, even tree bark in desperate times. Some older orphans teach you which plants won't kill you, which is valuable information, though not particularly encouraging that won't kill you is the standard for edibility. You chew on dandelion greens, which are bitter and unpleasant, but technically nutritious. You're not a foraging expert, you're just desperately trying not to starve. Sometimes you find food in truly bizarre places. A meat pie dropped on the street, stepped on but still partially intact. A cheese rind thrown away by someone wealthy enough to waste cheese rinds. A bowl of porridge left on a windowsill that you grab before whoever left it realizes their mistake. These unexpected discoveries feel like miracles, like the universe briefly remembered you exist and decided to throw you a bone. Literally in some cases. The danger with all this creative food finding is that it's technically stealing. If you're caught taking anything that someone could argue belongs to them, you're in trouble. The law doesn't distinguish much between stealing a loaf of bread and stealing a pile of garbage. It's all theft in the eyes of medieval justice. So you're always looking over your shoulder, always ready to run, always aware that your next meal could come with a side of punishment. You get sick sometimes from eating this way. Spoiled food causes stomach cramps that double you over. Rotten meat gives you vomiting and diarrhea that leave you even more dehydrated and weak. Contaminated water causes fevers, but you don't have the luxury of being picky. You can't wait for fresh, clean, safe food, because that food doesn't exist for you. You eat what you can find when you can find it and deal with the consequences later. Other orphans are both allies and competition in this scavenging lifestyle. Sometimes you work together, sharing information about where food can be found, helping each other reach high places or distract shopkeepers. But sometimes you're fighting over the same scraps, both of you desperate enough to hurt each other for a crust of bread. It's horrible. You hate it. But hunger makes people do things they never thought they would. The most depressing part about all this creative food finding is that you're surrounded by abundance. Medieval cities aren't starving. There's food everywhere, in shops, in homes, in markets, being cooked in taverns and served at feasts. But none of it is accessible to you through normal means, so you live on the margins, eating the waste products of a society that has plenty but shares little. You become an expert in garbage archaeology, capable of assessing the edibility of discarded food at a glance, knowing exactly how rotten something can be before it crosses the line into definitely will kill you territory. It's a skill set you never wanted but desperately need, and every night, as you fall asleep with something resembling food in your belly, you're grateful for that skill even as you hate that you need it. Because this is survival, not dignified, not pleasant, but survival nonetheless. One disgusting meal at a time. You're not the only orphan on the streets. There are others, dozens of them, all fighting for the same scraps, the same doorways, the same bits of mercy. Some become your allies. You share information, which baker throws out bread on Wednesdays, which guard looks the other way, which merchant has a soft spot for skinny kids with big eyes. But others see you as competition, a threat to their territory, their begging spot, their survival. And in a world where there's never enough to go around, friendship is a luxury most can't afford. The first time you encounter another orphan, you're not sure what to expect. You spot each other across a market square. both small, both dirty, both clearly in the same desperate situation. There's a moment of recognition, a flash of understanding that this person knows exactly what your life is like because they're living it too. But that recognition doesn't automatically mean friendship. It means you've identified a competitor for resources that are already impossibly scarce. The older orphans run the street hierarchy like tiny, malnourished warlords. They've been out here longer, they know the systems, and they've claimed the best begging spots, the safest sleeping places, and the most reliable food sources. If you're new, and you're relatively new, only a few months into this nightmare, you're at the bottom. You get the spots nobody wants, the doorways that offer almost no shelter, the begging locations where people are least likely to be generous. You don't complain because complaining is how you get beaten up by a 12-year-old who's spent 3 years perfecting the art of survival violence. There's a girl named Meg who's maybe 10 years old and rules a section of the market district like it's her personal kingdom. She's been on the streets for years, since she was tiny, and she's learned every trick there is. Other orphans pay her respect, which in practical terms means staying out of her territory unless you want trouble. You saw her once punch a boy who tried to beg outside the fishmonger's shop. Her shop, apparently. The boy was bigger than her, but she was meaner, and mean counts for a lot when everyone is desperate. But not all interactions are hostile. You meet Thomas on a particularly cold night. Both of you huddled in the same church doorway trying not to freeze. He's about your age, maybe younger. Hard to tell when everyone is malnourished and stunted. You eye each other warily at first, but eventually he shifts over a few inches, making more room, and you do the same. Neither of you speaks, but by morning you've shared body heat and survived another night. That's not friendship exactly. But it's not nothing. Thomas becomes something like a friend, as much as friendship exists in your world. You start looking for each other, sharing information in quiet whispers. The baker on Cross Street tosses bread on Tuesdays. The guard by the north gate is half blind, doesn't chase well. There's a merchant's wife near the cathedral who gives out soup on Thursdays. This information is valuable, sometimes life-saving, and the fact that Thomas shares it with you instead of hoarding it means something. It means he's decided you're more useful alive and cooperative than dead or competing. You form a small pack with Thomas and 2 other orphans, Greta and little William, who's maybe 6 and so small you worry he won't survive the winter. Your pack isn't official. You don't have meetings or rules. You just gravitate toward each other, sleep near each other, watch each other's backs when you can. When one of you finds food, sometimes you share. Not always. Hunger makes people selfish. But sometimes. Greta once gave you half a turnip when you'd had nothing for 2 days. You cried, which was embarrassing, but she pretended not to notice. The pack provides some safety. Medieval streets are dangerous, especially for small children alone. But 4 small children together are slightly less vulnerable. You can post lookouts when someone's stealing food. You can create distractions so one person can beg more effectively. You can defend each other, though defend is relative when none of you weigh more than a reasonably sized dog. Still, there's comfort in numbers, in knowing you're not completely alone in the world, but trust is fragile. When food is really scarce, when days pass without eating, friendships strain. You watch your pack members start to get protective of their begging spots, their information, their scraps. Little William once found a whole apple, a miracle, and didn't share it. You were angry, then hurt, then you understood. Survival comes first. Always. You can't blame him for choosing himself over you when that's exactly what you would have done. There are orphans you actively avoid. Marcus is one, he's 13, huge by orphan standards, and has a reputation for taking food from smaller kids by force. He's not exactly a bully because that implies some kind of social system with rules. He's just bigger and stronger and willing to hurt you for a crust of bread. You learn his patterns, his territory, his habits. When you see him coming, you disappear. It's not cowardice. It's survival strategy. The girls have it worse, you've noticed. The older orphan girls face dangers that boys don't, or at least don't face as frequently. They travel in pairs when they can, never sleep alone in isolated areas, share warnings about which men to avoid. There's a whole shadow network of information among the girls about which priests are safe, which merchants are handsy, which guards will help versus which ones are the danger. You overhear these whispered conversations sometimes and feel a combination of gratitude that you don't face those specific dangers and horror that anyone does. Competition for resources gets ugly sometimes. You've seen orphans fight over a piece of bread, literally punching and scratching each other while the bread falls in the mud and gets trampled. Nobody wins those fights. Everyone loses. But hunger and desperation don't make people rational. They make people animals, willing to hurt each other for the smallest advantage. You've been in those fights. You've thrown punches at another starving child over food scraps. The memory makes you sick, but you'd probably do it again if you were hungry enough. Some orphans form tighter bonds, siblings usually, who lost their parents together and now cling to each other like the last piece of family they have. You see pairs of them, an older one protecting a younger one, sharing everything, refusing to be separated. There's something beautiful about it, the way they maintain loyalty even in impossible circumstances. But it's also terrifying because when one dies, and death is common, the surviving sibling often falls apart completely. You've seen it happen. A girl whose little brother died of fever just stopped. Stopped begging, stopped eating, stopped trying. She was dead within 2 weeks. There are politics in the orphan world you never expected. Alliances form and dissolve. Territories get negotiated or fought over. Information becomes currency. You trade a good begging spot location for knowledge about where guards patrol. You broker deals about who sleeps where, who begs when, who gets first access to the garbage behind the tavern. It's like a miniature, desperate version of a noble court politics, except instead of land and titles, you're negotiating over literal garbage and doorways. The orphanage kids, when you encounter them, are a different category. They're not street orphans. They have beds, walls, regular meals however meagre, but they're let out sometimes for labour or church, and you see them walking in sad little lines, heads down, moving like prisoners. They look at you with something like envy, believe it or not. At least you're free, their eyes seem to say. You look back at them with your own envy. At least you're fed, you think. The grass is always browner on the other side when you're living in hell. Older orphans sometimes take younger ones under their wing, teaching them the survival skills that mean the difference between living and dying. An older girl once showed you how to walk with purpose so people assume you're on an errand rather than homeless. An older boy taught you which plants are edible and which will make you vomit your organs out. These teaching moments are gifts, freely given, and you hoard them in your memory like treasure. Because that's what they are, life-saving treasure that costs nothing but might mean everything. But mentorship is rare. Most older orphans don't have the energy to look after themselves, let alone teach younger kids. And there's a grim calculation involved. Why invest time in teaching someone who might not survive? Why form attachments to children who could be dead in a month? Emotional distance is protective. You've learned to not get too attached, to not invest too much hope in any friendship because loss is constant and grief is a luxury you can't afford. Sometimes you wonder what happens to the orphans who disappear. Did they die? Were they taken in by someone? Did they escape to another city? You never know. People just stop appearing. Thomas was there one day and gone the next. You looked for him for a week, checking all the usual spots, asking other orphans if they'd seen him. Nothing. He just vanished. You try not to think about what that might mean, but you think about it constantly. The orphan community, such as it is, runs on a strange mixture of cutthroat competition and unexpected cooperation. You'll fight another child over food scraps in the afternoon, then huddle together for warmth that night. You'll steal from each other when desperate, then share information when you can afford to. It's contradictory and confusing and probably not how human relationships are supposed to work, but it's the best you can do with what you have. You learn everyone's names, even the ones you don't like, even the ones you avoid. Knowing names makes you all feel a little more human, a little less like interchangeable units of suffering. You remember who was kind once, who shared when they didn't have to, who helped you up when you fell. And you remember who hurt you, who stole from you, who left you behind. Both lists matter. Both shape how you navigate this world. In the end, other orphans are mirrors. They show you what you look like, what you've become, what you might turn into if you survive. And that's both comforting and terrifying. You're not alone in your suffering, but you're also not special. You're just one of dozens, hundreds, all trying to survive the same impossible circumstances. And sometimes that's enough. Not friendship, not quite, but enough. If hunger doesn't get you, winter will. Medieval winters are brutal, relentless, and absolutely indifferent to whether you're a child or an adult, rich or poor, orphaned or loved. Temperatures plummet. Snow piles up in the streets, rivers freeze solid, and if you're an orphan with no home, no fire, and no family to huddle with, winter becomes a countdown. Every night you survive is a small miracle. Every morning you wake up is a victory against odds that are stacked impossibly high. The first snowfall looks almost beautiful. Fat white flakes drifting down from a grey sky, covering the filthy streets in a clean white blanket, making everything look peaceful and pure. For about 5 minutes you can almost enjoy it. Then reality sets in. Snow means cold. Snow means wet. Snow means the already difficult task of surviving just got exponentially harder. That pretty white blanket is actually a frozen death shroud, and you're wearing inadequate rags with holes in them. Your single tunic, already pathetic in autumn, becomes a cruel joke in winter. The fabric is so thin you can practically see through it, and the holes that were merely annoying in warmer weather now become portals for freezing air to attack your skin directly. You try stuffing the tunic with straw, with dried grass, with anything that might provide insulation. It helps minimally. You look like a lumpy scarecrow, and you're still freezing, but at least you're a slightly warmer lumpy scarecrow. Progress. Your feet are in constant crisis. The rag wrappings freeze solid, turning into icy casts around your feet that somehow manage to provide no warmth whatsoever. You can't feel your toes most days. When you can feel them, they hurt so badly you wish you couldn't. You've seen what frostbite does to other orphans, blackened fingers and toes that eventually just fall off. You check your extremities obsessively, wiggling your toes inside their frozen rag prisons, making sure they still respond to commands. So far they do, but it's early winter yet. Finding shelter becomes desperately urgent. That doorway that was merely uncomfortable in autumn is now potentially lethal. Wind whips through the streets, driving snow into every crack and crevice, finding you no matter where you hide. You need deeper shelter, better coverage, walls on multiple sides if possible. But so does every other orphan, every beggar, every homeless person in the city. The competition for survivable sleeping spots becomes vicious. You discover that sleeping is terrifying in winter. You've heard the stories, orphans who fell asleep in the cold and simply never woke up, froze to death in their sleep, which sounds peaceful but probably wasn't. You're scared of sleep now, scared that if you let yourself drift off too deeply, you won't come back. So you sleep lightly, fitfully, waking yourself up every hour or so to move your limbs, to prove you're still alive, to keep blood flowing to your frozen extremities. Movement becomes survival strategy. You can't stay still because stillness means freezing, so you walk, constantly, pacing back and forth in whatever sheltered area you've claimed, stomping your feet, swinging your arms, generating what little body heat you can through motion. It's exhausting. You're already weak from malnutrition, and now you're burning precious calories just trying not to turn into an ice sculpture. But stopping means dying, so you keep moving. Other orphans have the same idea, so you see these pathetic little parades of children shuffling back and forth in doorways and under bridges, all of us too cold to sleep, too scared to stop moving. Sometimes you walk together, forming little circles of motion, sharing body heat while you pace. Nobody talks much. Talking requires energy you don't have. You just move, breathe, and try to survive until sunrise. The nights are impossibly long. In medieval winter, darkness falls early and stays late. You're talking maybe 14, 15 hours of frozen darkness that you have to endure before daylight returns. Daylight doesn't make you warm exactly, but at least you can see, and somehow that makes everything slightly less terrifying. The nights, though, those are when orphans die. You hear about it in the morning. Did you hear? Little Margaret didn't wake up. Thomas froze in the night. Each death is a reminder that you could be next. Snow creates new problems beyond just cold. It's harder to walk, harder to beg, harder to steal food when you're trudging through drifts that come up to your knees. Your frozen feet slip on ice. You fall constantly, bruising yourself on frozen cobblestones that feel like iron. Getting up becomes harder each time because your body's running out of strength, out of warmth, out of will to continue this impossible fight. The wealthy people barely notice winter's effect on them. They have fires, thick clothing, warm food and walls. They complain about the cold while sitting in their heated homes wrapped in wool blankets sipping hot wine. You watch them through windows sometimes. These impossible tableaux of warmth and comfort that might as well be taking place on another planet. The contrast is devastating. They're 15 feet away from you, but they might as well be in paradise while you're in hell. Finding food becomes even harder in winter. The market closes early to avoid the cold. Fewer people are out on the streets, which means fewer begging opportunities. The garbage freezes solid, making it harder to dig through midden heaps for scraps. Even the dogs, your usual competition, have retreated to whatever shelter they can find. You're out there alone, searching for food in a frozen wasteland that has nothing to give. Water becomes a challenge too. The wells freeze, the fountains freeze. Rivers and streams lock up under thick ice. You're desperately thirsty, but the only water available is frozen solid. You learn to eat snow, letting it melt in your mouth, but snow doesn't hydrate you well and it makes you even colder. Some days you break ice from the edge of wells, sucking on frozen chunks, your lips cracking and bleeding from the cold. Your body starts to shut down in small ways. Your skin cracks and bleeds, your lips split open, your joints ache constantly. Your muscles cramp from the cold and the constant shivering. Shivering burns calories. It's your body's attempt to generate heat, but you don't have calories to spare. You're literally shaking yourself towards starvation, but you can't stop shivering. It's involuntary, your body's last-ditch effort to keep your core temperature up. Illness spreads faster in winter. Crowded spaces where people huddle for warmth become perfect breeding grounds for disease. You develop a cough that rattles in your chest and won't go away. Other orphans are coughing too, all of you hacking and wheezing and spreading whatever sickness we're incubating. There's no medicine, no rest, no recovery. You just stay sick and hope your body is strong enough to fight off whatever is trying to kill you this week. The church bells still ring, marking hours, calling people to prayer. But in winter, those bells sound different, lonelier, more mournful. Each ring is a reminder that another hour has passed, another hour you've survived, another hour closer to spring if you can just hold on. You start counting them obsessively. 6 more hours until dawn. 4 more hours, 2 more hours. You can make it 2 more hours. Maybe. Some orphans don't fight it anymore. You see them giving up, lying down in the snow, accepting that this is how they die. Part of you understands. Fighting is exhausting. Surviving is exhausting. Every day is a battle that never ends, and winter makes that battle so much harder. But something stubborn in you refuses to quit. Maybe it's survival instinct. Maybe it's too stupid to know when you're beaten. Either way, you keep going. The older orphans try to help the younger ones when they can. They share body heat, share knowledge about the warmest spots, share techniques for surviving the night. An older girl shows you how to wrap your hands in your tunic sleeves to protect your fingers. An older boy teaches you to breathe through your nose so the air warms slightly before hitting your lungs. These small lessons might save your life. Probably won't, but might. You develop a relationship with cold that's almost personal. You hate it, obviously, but you also respect it. You understand that cold is powerful, patient, and utterly without mercy. It doesn't care that you're 8 years old. It doesn't care that you've already suffered more than any child should. It will kill you without hesitation if you give it the chance, so you don't. You fight every single day, every single hour, sometimes every single minute. By midwinter, you've lost count of how many orphans have died. Too many. Way too many. You stopped learning names because knowing names makes the deaths hurt more. They're just faces now, familiar faces that are there one day and gone the next. You say a quiet prayer for them when you remember, when you have the energy. Not to God necessarily, you're not sure God is listening, but just something, an acknowledgement that they existed, that they mattered, that they tried. The worst part about winter isn't the cold or the hunger or the danger, it's the hopelessness. Summer feels impossibly far away. Spring is a fantasy. You can't imagine being warm again, being dry again, being anything other than frozen and desperate. Time loses meaning when every day is identical suffering. You exist in an eternal present of cold and hunger and fear, with no end in sight. But somehow, you keep surviving. One night at a time, one frozen footstep at a time, one shivering hour at a time. You survive because the alternative is unacceptable. You survive because something deep inside you refuses to let winter win. You survive because you're too stubborn, too desperate, or too foolish to quit. And every morning when you wake up, when you open your eyes and realize you made it through another night, there's a tiny spark of something. Not quite hope, not quite pride, just acknowledgement. You're still here, still breathing, still fighting. Winter may be the great killer, but you're not dead yet. Your body is not your friend. It's cold, hungry, and constantly under attack from a medieval world that doesn't believe in germ theory or antibiotics. A simple cough can turn into something that rattles your lungs and leaves you gasping. A cut on your foot can fester and swell until you can't walk. A fever can burn through you in days, leaving you delirious and alone in a doorway while the world steps over you. And there's no medicine, no doctor who'll see you for free, no parent to hold a cool cloth to your forehead and whisper that everything will be okay. The first sign that you're getting sick is often subtle. A scratchy feeling in your throat, a slight ache in your muscles, a tiredness that goes beyond the usual exhaustion of street life. You try to ignore it because acknowledging illness feels like admitting defeat. But your body doesn't care what you acknowledge. It proceeds with whatever infection or disease it's incubating, and you're just along for the increasingly miserable ride. Within a day or two, the cough starts. Just a tickle at first, then something deeper, wetter, more concerning. You're coughing up things that definitely shouldn't be coming out of an 8-year-old's lungs. Thick phlegm, sometimes streaked with blood, sometimes green or yellow. Each cough feels like someone is scraping your chest with a rusty blade. Other people start moving away from you when you cough, which would be insulting if you had the energy to care. They're scared you're contagious. They're right to be scared. Fevers are their own special nightmare. Your body temperature rises trying to fight off whatever infection has taken hold, but without proper nutrition or rest, it's a battle your body can't win. You alternate between burning up and freezing cold, sometimes within the same hour. Your skin is hot to the touch, but you're shivering violently. Sweat soaks your already disgusting tunic, then evaporates in the cold air, leaving you clammy and even more miserable. When fever gets bad, reality starts to bend. You see things that aren't there. Shadows moving wrong. Faces in the darkness. Your dead mother standing at the end of the alley calling your name. Delirium is terrifying because you can't trust your own mind anymore. You might wander away from your safe spot, confused about where you are. You might forget to drink water. You might do 100 dangerous things because your brain is literally cooking and can't make rational decisions. Cuts and scrapes are constant when you're living on the streets. You're always banging into things, falling on cobblestones, scraping against rough walls. Most cuts are minor. They hurt, they bleed a little, then they scab over and you forget about them. But some don't heal. Some get infected. An infection in the medieval world is a death sentence they just haven't executed yet. You notice the infection starting because the cut hurts more than it should. The skin around it gets red, then angry red, then swollen. It's hot to the touch, radiating heat like there's a tiny furnace under your skin. Pus develops, thick and yellow-white oozing from the wound. The smell is distinctive, sweet and rotten at the same time. You try to clean it with whatever water you can find, but medieval water is often dirtier than the wound itself, so you might just be making it worse. As the infection spreads, red lines start appearing on your skin, travelling up your arm or leg like roads on a map leading straight to your heart. You don't know the word sepsis, but you know those lines mean danger. You've seen other orphans with those lines. Some survived, many didn't. The infection moves through your bloodstream, poisoning your entire body, and there's nothing you can do but hope your body is strong enough to fight it off. Spoiler, your body is not strong. Your body is malnourished, exhausted and running on fumes. Stomach illnesses are frequent and horrifying. You eat spoiled food because you have no choice, and sometimes your digestive system rebels spectacularly. Vomiting and diarrhea hit simultaneously, emptying your body from both ends with impressive violence. You lose fluids you desperately need. You become dehydrated, which makes everything worse. Your lips crack, your eyes sink. Your skin loses elasticity. You're literally dying from the inside out because you ate a piece of rotten meat 3 days ago. The medieval world has remedies, sort of. Folk cures passed down through generations, most of which don't work and some of which actively make things worse. A kind old woman once told you to tie a dead toad around your neck to cure fever. You tried it. The fever remained. The smell was memorable. Another time, someone suggested drinking your own urine for infections. You were desperate enough to try. It didn't help. It turns out that ancient medical advice is about as reliable as you'd expect from a civilization that thinks demons cause headaches. Parasites are another joy. You definitely have worms, intestinal parasites that live in your gut and steal what little nutrition you manage to consume. You know this because sometimes you see them in your waist, white and wriggling. It's disturbing on a primal level, knowing there are creatures living inside you, eating your food, making you even more malnourished than you already are. But there's no deworming medication. You just live with it. You and your parasite roommates, all trying to survive on the same insufficient diet. Lice and fleas are constant companions. They live in your hair, your clothes, your bedding materials. They bite constantly, leaving you covered in small red welts that itch like fire. You scratch until you bleed, which creates new wounds that can get infected, which brings us back to the infection problem. It's a vicious cycle of parasitic misery. You've tried everything to get rid of them, picking them out one by one, washing in cold water, even shaving your head with a dull knife. Nothing works completely. They always come back. Skin conditions develop from the combination of dirt, malnutrition, and constant exposure to the elements. Rashes appear and spread. Your skin cracks and bleeds. You develop sores that won't heal. Some orphans have scabies, a mite infestation that causes intense itching and distinctive rash patterns. It spreads through contact, so sharing sleeping space means sharing diseases. You're all infection vectors for each other, but you can't afford to sleep alone, so you accept the disease exchange as the price of survival. Dental problems start early and never stop. Your teeth hurt constantly. Cavities develop. Rot spreads. Gums become infected and swollen. One of your back teeth is loose, wobbling in its socket, and you know it's only a matter of time before it falls out or has to be pulled. Some orphans do their own dental work, tying string around a bad tooth and yanking it out themselves. The pain is excruciating but brief, better than months of constant toothache. Probably. You're not looking forward to finding out personally. The medieval understanding of medicine is based on humours. Blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. When you're sick, the theory goes, your humours are unbalanced. The cure is bloodletting, which is exactly as helpful as it sounds for an already weak, malnourished child. Fortunately, no barber surgeon is offering you free bloodletting services, so you're spared that particular medieval medical intervention. Unfortunately, that means you have no treatment at all. Your options are survive on your own or die. Those are the options. Pain becomes background noise. You hurt so constantly in so many different ways that you stop consciously registering it. Your feet hurt, your stomach hurts, your head hurts, your chest hurts, your joints hurt, your muscles hurt. Everything hurts all the time. It's just your baseline now. You only notice pain when it's exceptionally bad, when it rises above the constant thrum of generalized suffering that is your physical existence. Other orphans try to help when they can, sharing folk remedies that might work or might be complete nonsense. Someone tells you that spider webs can stop bleeding. Surprisingly, this one actually has some truth to it. Someone else insists that keeping a raw onion in your pocket cures everything. This one does not. You accept all advice gratefully because even useless hope is better than no hope at all. And occasionally, very occasionally, something actually helps. A poultice made from herbs reduces swelling. Willow bark tea reduces fever slightly. Small victories in a war your body is slowly losing. The worst illnesses are the ones that sweep through orphan populations like wildfire. Dysentery, typhoid, tuberculosis. You don't know the names, but you know the symptoms. You know that when one orphan starts showing signs, others will follow. You know that crowded sleeping spaces become death traps. You know that there's nothing you can do except try to avoid the sick ones, which feels cruel but is practical. Survival sometimes requires hard choices, like not sharing warmth with a friend who's coughing blood because you don't want to be next. You develop a strange relationship with your body, viewing it almost as a separate entity that keeps betraying you. Your body gets sick when you need it to be strong. Your body demands food and water you can't provide. Your body shivers and aches and fails in countless small ways, but it also keeps going. Despite malnutrition, disease, injury, and constant stress, your body continues functioning. Your heart keeps beating, your lungs keep breathing, your immune system keeps fighting infections even though it's severely disadvantaged. Sometimes you wonder how much more your body can take. How many illnesses can you survive before one finally kills you? How much suffering can a small human body endure before it just gives up? These aren't abstract philosophical questions. They're practical calculations about your remaining lifespan. Every illness feels like rolling dice with death, and the odds never improve. There are moments of relative health between the illnesses, brief windows where you're not actively sick with anything. These moments feel miraculous. You can breathe without coughing, you can walk without limping, you can think clearly without fever fog. These are the good days, and you try to appreciate them even though you know they won't last. Another illness is always coming. Your body is constantly under siege in a world full of pathogens and no defences. The cruelest part is that modern medicine could fix most of this easily. Antibiotics would clear your infections in days. Antiparasitics would eliminate your worms. Basic first aid would prevent wounds from becoming life-threatening. Proper nutrition would strengthen your immune system. But none of that exists in your world. You live in a time before humanity understood how disease works, how to prevent it, how to treat it. You're dying from things that will be trivial to cure in a few centuries. But you don't have a few centuries, you have now, and now offers nothing but suffering. So your body continues its betrayal, getting sick, getting hurt, getting weaker, and you continue trying to survive despite it, hoping that maybe, possibly, your body will hold together long enough for you to see another spring. But honestly, you're not betting on it. Stealing is a sin. Everyone knows that. The priest reminds you every Sunday, assuming you bother to sneak into the back of the church to listen. But when the choice is between sin and starvation, between theft and freezing to death, morality becomes a lot more flexible. You steal what you can, a heel of bread from a distracted baker, a turnip from a farmer's cart, a scrap of cloth from a washing line to wrap around your frozen feet. Sometimes you get away with it, sometimes you don't. And when you don't, the punishment is swift, public, and brutal. The first time you steal, your hands shake. You're watching a baker load his cart with fresh loaves, the smell making your stomach cramp with desperate hunger. He turns away for just a moment, talking to another merchant, distracted, not watching his precious bread. Your hand shoots out, grabs the smallest loaf from the edge of the cart, and you're running before your brain fully processes what you've done. Your heart pounds like it's trying to escape your chest. You expect to hear shouting, footsteps chasing you, hands grabbing you. But nothing comes. You made it. You're holding bread you didn't beg for, didn't find in the garbage, didn't earn in any legitimate way. You stole it. And God help you, you do it again. The moral weight of theft is complicated when you're an orphan. The church says stealing is wrong, that you'll go to hell for it, that God sees all your sins and keeps score. But God hasn't fed you. God hasn't kept you warm. God hasn't done much of anything useful as far as you can tell. Meanwhile, that stolen bread is the first substantial food you've had in 3 days. So if choosing between God's approval and not starving means choosing not starving, well, you'll take your chances with divine judgment. You become strategic about theft. You learn to identify easy targets, distracted merchants, poorly guarded carts, market stalls where the seller is serving customers and can't watch everything at once. You learn timing, waiting for the perfect moment when eyes are elsewhere, when the crowd provides cover, when you can grab something and disappear into the chaos of the medieval street before anyone notices. Small items are your specialty. A single apple from a pile of hundreds, one turnip from a farmer's cart, a piece of cheese left unwatched for a moment. You're not emptying stores or robbing people blind. You're taking the minimum necessary for survival, which somehow makes it feel less wrong. You're not a criminal mastermind. You're a starving child taking food that will barely be missed. The moral calculus gets easier when you frame it that way, but the guilt never completely disappears. You were raised, however briefly, with the understanding that stealing is wrong. Your parents, before they died, taught you basic morality. Don't take what isn't yours. Respect other people's property. Work for what you need. Those lessons rattle around in your head even as you pocket bread you didn't pay for. You're betraying their teachings. You're becoming something they wouldn't recognize. But they're not here to feed you, so their rules don't quite apply anymore. The penalties for theft are terrifying. Medieval justice isn't concerned with rehabilitation or second chances. It's concerned with punishment and deterrence. Get caught stealing as an orphan, and you might lose a hand. Actually lose it. Chopped off in the town square while people watch and cheer like it's entertainment. They're not joking about that. You've seen it happen. Seen a boy not much older than you held down while an executioner raised an axe and brought it down on his wrist. The screaming stopped eventually. The bleeding took longer. Even minor thefts can result in severe punishment. Whipping is common, stripped to the waist and beaten in public until your back is raw and bleeding. Branding is another favourite. A hot iron pressed to your forehead or hand, marking you permanently as a thief. The stocks are relatively merciful by comparison, locked in place while townspeople throw rotten vegetables and insults. It's humiliating and uncomfortable. But at least you leave with all your body parts intact. So every theft is a gamble. Is this bread worth potentially losing a hand? Is that turnip worth a public whipping? The answer should be no, obviously. But hunger makes you a different person. Hunger makes you calculate that the risk is worth it because the alternative is definitely dying slowly of starvation. At least theft gives you a chance. You develop theft skills through necessity. Your fingers learn to be quick, your movements casual. You practice the art of looking innocent, never running until you're far away, never looking guilty, just walking calmly like you absolutely belong here, and that bread in your hand is totally yours and nobody should question it. Confidence is half the theft. Looking like you're stealing is how you get caught. Other orphans teach you tricks. Thomas shows you how to create a distraction. One orphan asks the merchant a long, complicated question while another grabs food. Greta teaches you about hiding stolen goods immediately, stuffing them inside your tunic so your hands are empty if someone questions you. An older boy demonstrates the art of the misdirection, pointing at something fake urgent. Is that smoke? While your other hand is doing the actual stealing. Not everyone steals successfully. You watch other orphans get caught, and it's horrifying. A girl about your age grabs an apple too obviously, and the merchant's hand clamps down on her wrist before she can run. He drags her into the street yelling for the guards, and she's crying and begging and promising never to do it again. It doesn't matter. Justice in medieval times isn't interested in promises from orphan children. You don't see what happens to her after the guards arrive, but you hear about it later. Whipped, 10 lashes. She's back on the streets the next day, moving slowly, wincing with every step. The merchants hate you. All of you. All orphans, all beggars, anyone who looks like they might steal. They watch you with hostile suspicion, following you with their eyes, keeping hands on their merchandise when you pass. You can't exactly blame them. You're trying to steal from them. But it makes survival even harder. Some merchants don't wait for theft. They'll chase you away preemptively, assuming you're there to steal, just because you exist nearby looking poor and desperate. You steal from washing lines too, which feels somehow worse than stealing food. Food at least makes sense. You're hungry, you take food. But clothes? You're stealing someone's laboriously handmade garments, probably the only spare shirt they own. But your feet are wrapped in rags that are more whole than cloth, and there's a strip of linen hanging right there, and you need it more than they do. So you take it, and you try not to think about the person who washed that linen and hung it to dry and came back to find it gone. The worst part about stealing is that it gets easier. The first theft made your hands shake and your heart race, and your conscience scream. The 10th theft is routine. The 50th is barely worth noting. You're becoming desensitized to your own criminal behavior, which should worry you but mostly just feels like practical adaptation. Guilt is a luxury. You can't afford luxuries. Sometimes you steal from other poor people, which violates even your flexible moral code. Taking from wealthy merchants feels almost righteous. They have plenty. You have nothing. It's wealth redistribution in the most direct possible way. But taking from another struggling family, another hungry person, another orphan even, that's lower, that's desperate. That's what you do when you have absolutely no other options, and your survival instinct overrides all ethical considerations. You justify it constantly. It's not really stealing, you tell yourself, it's surviving. God wouldn't want you to starve when food is available. The merchants have more than enough. You're not hurting anyone, not really. These justifications help you sleep at night, or at least they would if sleeping weren't already difficult for a dozen other reasons. Deep down, you know stealing is wrong, but deeper down, you know dying is worse. The irony isn't lost on you that the people who preach most about the sin of stealing are the same people who walk past starving children every day without sharing food. The baker whose bread you steal probably threw out more burned loaves yesterday than you've eaten all week. The merchants who guard their goods so jealously wouldn't miss a single turnip from their cartload. The priests who condemn theft somehow never get around to sharing the church's considerable resources with orphans. Everyone's very concerned about protecting property. Nobody's quite as concerned about protecting lives. You form a hierarchy of acceptable theft in your mind. Stealing food from merchants who have plenty, justified. Stealing small items needed for survival, necessary. Stealing from wash lines, regrettable but understandable. Stealing from other orphans, horrible but sometimes unavoidable. Stealing from the genuinely poor, that's a line you try not to cross, though you've crossed it. Violence during theft, that's where you draw your personal line. You'll steal bread, but you won't hurt someone for it. Some orphans don't have that boundary. You're grateful you still do. The legal system doesn't distinguish between types of theft. Stealing bread gets punished the same as stealing gold, which seems wildly disproportionate but perfectly captures medieval justice philosophy. It's not about the value of what was stolen. It's about maintaining order, protecting property rights, and demonstrating power through brutal enforcement. You're not being punished for taking bread. You're being punished for challenging the social order that says some people get to eat while others starve. Every successful theft is a small victory and a moral compromise. You eat, but you've sinned. You survive, but you've become a thief. You make it through another day, but you're a little less innocent, a little more damaged, a little further from the person your parents raised. The priest says theft damns your soul. But starvation definitely kills your body, and you need your body to have any chance of saving your soul later. So you steal, and you'll steal again tomorrow, and the day after, as long as you're hungry and there's food you can take. Because in the end, survival isn't about being good, it's about being alive. And if being alive means being a thief, well, you'll add it to the list of things medieval life has forced you to become. Night in a medieval city is a different beast entirely. The streets, already dangerous during the day, transform into something far more sinister once the sun goes down. Torches flicker weakly in the distance. Shadows pool in doorways and alleyways. The air grows colder, sharper, meaner. And the people who come out at night aren't the ones you want to meet. Drunks stumble from taverns looking for trouble. Thieves prowl for easy marks. And worse things lurk in the darkness. Things that see a small, alone child as an opportunity. The darkness itself is oppressive. There are no streetlights, no electric glow, no constant illumination that modern people take for granted. When the sun sets, the medieval city plunges into a darkness so complete it feels physical, like you could reach out and touch it. The moon helps when it's full and the sky is clear, but most nights you're navigating by memory and feel, keeping one hand on walls, shuffling your feet to avoid obstacles you can't see. The few light sources that exist are private, not public. Wealthy homes have candles burning in windows. Taverns have fires and torches that spill light into the street, creating islands of illumination in seas of darkness. The church might keep a lamp burning at its entrance, but between these scattered points of light there's nothing but shadow. You move through this darkness like a blind person, every sense heightened because your eyes are essentially useless. Sounds become terrifying at night. During the day, street noise is constant. Merchants shouting, carts rattling, people talking, animals making their various sounds. At night, the city goes quiet except for specific, isolated noises that echo through the darkness. Footsteps on cobblestones, a door slamming, glass breaking, someone screaming several streets away. Each sound makes your heart race because you can't see what's causing it. Your imagination fills in the blanks, usually with the worst possible scenarios. The drunks are predictable in their unpredictability. They stumble out of taverns after hours of drinking cheap ale and cheaper wine, barely able to walk straight, looking for entertainment or fights or both. You hear them before you see them, loud voices, aggressive laughter, the sound of someone urinating against a wall. You press yourself into doorways, trying to be invisible, hoping they'll pass without noticing you. Sometimes they do pass. Sometimes they don't. A drunk man might see you and decide you're hilarious, poking at you with a stick, laughing at your filthy appearance, treating you like a performing animal. Or he might get mean, kicking at you, blaming you for his problems, taking out a lifetime of frustrations on a child who can't fight back. Or worse, he might get other ideas, seeing a vulnerable child alone in the darkness as an opportunity for violence you don't even want to name. You learn to smell taverns from a distance, the sour smell of spilled ale, the smoke from cooking fires, the general stench of unwashed humanity packed into small spaces. When you smell that smell getting stronger, you change directions. Taverns at closing time are danger zones. Nothing good happens for orphans near taverns after midnight. The criminals come out at night too. Professional thieves who move through darkness like they're part of it, silent and efficient. You're not their target usually. You have nothing worth stealing, but you see them working. Watch them slip into homes through unlatched windows, emerge minutes later with bundles of goods, disappear into the labyrinth of alleys. They ignore you mostly, professional courtesy between criminals. You steal to survive, they steal as a career. It's different, but you're both operating outside the law, so they don't bother you if you don't bother them. But there are others, men who prowl the darkness looking for vulnerable targets, children especially. You've been warned about them by other orphans, taught to recognize the signs. A man walking slowly, watching, following. A voice calling out friendly, too friendly, offering food or shelter or warmth. These men are predators, and you're prey, and the darkness is their hunting ground. You've had close calls. A man once followed you for 3 streets, his footsteps echoing behind yours, getting closer. You ran, your heart pounding so hard you thought it would burst, diving into a narrow alley he couldn't fit through, hearing him curse as you disappeared into the maze of streets you know better than he does. You didn't sleep that night, just kept moving, kept running, because stopping felt like dying. The Night Watch exists theoretically. Guards are supposed to patrol the streets, keeping order, protecting citizens. In practice, they're few, lazy, and not particularly interested in protecting orphan children. They patrol the wealthy districts, the areas where important people live. The poor quarters, where you spend most of your time, those get token patrols at best, and the watch itself can be dangerous. Some guards see orphans as target practice, kicking at you, hitting you with sticks, chasing you for sport. Animals come out at night too, dogs roaming in packs, looking for food or just for something to bark at. Rats scurry through gutters and across streets, their eyes reflecting what little light exists, hundreds of them moving like a furry tide. Cats prowl, hunting those rats, occasionally hissing at you if you get too close to their territory. You're not afraid of the animals exactly, but they add to the overall menace of night, reminding you that you're just another creature competing for survival in a hostile environment. The cold is worse at night. Temperatures drop as soon as the sun disappears, and without the sun's weak warmth, winter nights become almost unbearable. You can see your breath in thick clouds. Frost forms on stone walls, on your eyebrows, on the rags wrapped around your feet. The cold seeps into your bones, making everything hurt, making sleep difficult even when you're exhausted. Night is when orphans freeze to death, drifting off into sleep they never wake from. You develop night survival strategies. Never sleep in the open if you can help it. Find doorways, alcoves, anything with walls on multiple sides. Try to sleep near other orphans for warmth and safety in numbers. Keep your back to a wall so nothing can approach from behind. Wake yourself up regularly to check surroundings, to keep blood flowing, to make sure you're still alive. Sleep lightly, ready to run at the first sign of danger. Navigation at night is an acquired skill. You memorize the streets during daylight, counting steps, noting landmarks, creating mental maps. At night, you rely on those maps, feeling your way through darkness, recognizing locations by touch and sound. The butcher's shop has a particular smell. The church corner has a distinctive shape. The well in the market square makes that specific echo when you tap it. You become a bat, navigating by everything except sight. Some nights you don't sleep at all. When it's too cold, too dangerous, or you're too scared, you just keep moving, walking in circles through your territory, staying in motion to stay warm, to stay awake, to stay alive. These nights are exhausting. By morning you're dizzy with fatigue, stumbling through the day like a ghost, but at least you survived. At least you're still here. The darkness plays tricks on your mind. Shapes that aren't there, faces and shadows, voices that might be real or might be your exhausted brain hallucinating. You see your mother sometimes, standing at the end of an alley, reaching out to you. You know she's not real. She's dead. You watched her die. But the hallucination is so convincing that you call out to her anyway. She never answers, never comes closer, just fades back into the darkness, leaving you alone again. Other orphans huddle together at night when they can, forming protective clusters in doorways and under bridges. There's unspoken comfort in numbers, even if those numbers are just 4 or 5 starving children who can't really protect each other from anything. But at least you're not alone. At least when you hear frightening sounds in the darkness, there are others hearing them too. Others as scared as you are. Morning can't come fast enough. You watch the sky obsessively, waiting for that first hint of grey that means dawn is approaching. The darkness seems to last forever. Endless hours of cold and fear and wondering if you'll make it to sunrise. But eventually it always comes. The darkness slowly, painfully slowly begins to lift. Shapes become visible. Streets emerge from shadow. The city wakes up, and the people who belong in daylight come out, and you can breathe again. You're exhausted. You're cold. You're scared. But you survived another night, and in your world, that's the only victory that matters. The medieval night is not a time for rest or peace. It's a gauntlet you have to run, a test you have to pass, a danger you have to survive. Every night. Every single night. With no end in sight. And the worst part is knowing that tomorrow night will be exactly the same. The darkness will fall again, the dangers will return, and you'll be back out here, small and alone and trying desperately not to become another orphan who didn't make it to morning. The streets at night don't care that you're 8 years old. They don't care that you're tired, hungry and scared. They don't care about anything. They're just there, dark and dangerous and waiting. And so are you. Waiting for dawn. Waiting for safety. Waiting for any sign that the world might be less cruel tomorrow, but mostly just waiting for the night to end. If you're truly desperate, there's always the workhouse. It's not a home. It's not even close, but it's a roof, walls, and the promise of food. Thin gruel, stale bread, maybe a bit of meat if you're lucky. The catch? You work. Hard. All day. Every day. Children as young as 5 are put to tasks that break their bodies and dull their spirits. Hauling water, scrubbing floors, carding wool, stitching until their fingers bleed. The workhouse doesn't care if you're tired, sick, or scared. It cares that you're useful, and if you're not useful, you're expendable. The workhouse looms at the edge of town like a prison, which essentially is what it is. A massive stone building with small windows and heavy doors, designed more for containment than comfort. You've walked past it dozens of times, always with a mixture of longing and dread. Inside those walls are beds, regular meals, protection from winter. But also inside those walls is a different kind of suffering, more predictable maybe, but no less brutal than the streets. Getting into the workhouse isn't automatic, they don't take everyone. The master of the workhouse, usually a man with dead eyes and a permanent scowl, examines potential admissions like a farmer examining livestock. Are you strong enough to work? Are you young enough to be trained? Are you sick with something contagious that might spread to other workers? If you fail the inspection, you're turned away. Too sick. Back to the streets. Too weak. Not their problem. The workhouse is a business, not a charity, despite what it claims. If you pass inspection, you're assigned a bed. And by bed, we mean a wooden platform with a thin straw mattress shared with 2 or 3 other children. The beds are arranged in long rows in a dormitory that's freezing in winter and suffocating in summer. Privacy doesn't exist. Personal space is a luxury you left behind at the door. You sleep packed together like firewood, breathing the same recycled air, sharing the same fleas and lice and diseases. The food is, well, it's food. Barely. Breakfast is thin gruel. Oats boiled in water until they form a grey, lumpy substance that tastes like someone's already eaten it once. Lunch might be bread, but the kind of bread that's mostly flour mixed with sawdust or ground peas to stretch supplies. Dinner is more gruel, occasionally with a few vegetables thrown in if the workhouse is feeling generous, or if someone important is visiting and they need to look charitable. Meat happens maybe once a week, and by meat we mean gristle, fat, and mystery parts in thin soup. But it's regular food. That's the thing. You eat every day, at specific times, in specific amounts. It's not enough. You're still hungry most of the time, but it's predictable. Your stomach learns the schedule. You stop having the dizzy spells from starvation. Your body, accustomed to crisis, starts to stabilize slightly. This should feel like relief. Instead, it feels like trading one kind of suffering for another. The work starts at dawn. A bell rings through the dormitory, harsh and unforgiving, and you stumble out of bed with dozens of other children, all of you moving like exhausted zombies toward whatever task you've been assigned. The workhouse operates like a factory, producing goods that the master sells for profit, while paying you nothing except the bare minimum required to keep you alive and working. The tasks vary depending on your age and strength. Smaller children pick oakum, separating old rope fibres until your fingers are raw and bleeding, breathing in the dust and tar residue until your lungs burn. Older children might card wool, haul water, scrub floors, work in the laundry, or help in the kitchen. The work is mind-numbing, physically exhausting, and never-ending. You finish one task only to be immediately assigned another. Breaks are short and grudging, like the master resents that you need to breathe occasionally. The discipline is brutal. Step out of line, work too slowly, complain about anything, and punishment is swift. The master carries a cane, and he's not shy about using it. Beatings are common, public, designed to humiliate and hurt in equal measure. You're bent over a bench while the cane comes down on your back, your legs, anywhere that's convenient. The other children watch, learning the lesson, obedience or pain, usually both. There are other punishments too. Missing meals is a favourite, ironic, considering food is the main reason you're here. Solitary confinement in a dark closet, hours or days depending on the offence. Extra work assignments, often the most disgusting tasks available. Cleaning the latrines, scrubbing the floors where sick children vomited, hauling chamber pots. These punishments are meant to break your spirit, to make you so afraid of disobedience that you'll accept anything rather than resist. The other children in the workhouse are a mix of orphans like you, children whose parents are too poor to feed them, and kids whose families just gave up on them. Some have been here for years. Their eyes have that dead quality, like something inside them stopped fighting a long time ago. They move mechanically, speak rarely, show no emotion. They're not really children anymore. They're just labour units, human machines processing whatever task they're assigned. Disease spreads quickly in the crowded, unsanitary conditions. Typhoid, dysentery, tuberculosis. They sweep through the dormitories like fire through dry grass. When someone gets sick, they're sometimes separated, but usually not quickly enough. By the time the authorities notice, half the children are already coughing or feverish or worse. The mortality rate in workhouses is shocking, though nobody talks about it. Dead children are buried quietly, their beds immediately filled with new arrivals. The worst part isn't the work or the punishment or even the disease, it's the hopelessness. On the streets, you're free. Yes, you're starving and freezing and in constant danger, but you're autonomous. You make your own decisions, follow your own path, maintain some tiny shred of dignity and independence. In the workhouse, that's gone. You're owned, controlled, reduced to a unit of labour that eats and sleeps and works according to someone else's schedule. You watch older children who've been in the workhouse for years, and they're broken in ways that street life doesn't break people. They don't have dreams anymore, don't have hope, don't even have anger. They've been ground down so thoroughly that they've forgotten they're human beings deserving of better. They'll work in the workhouse until they're old enough to be turned out, and then they'll work in factories or fields until they die, never knowing anything except endless labour and survival. Some children try to escape. It's technically allowed to leave. You're not slaves, the master insists, just residents receiving charitable care in exchange for honours work. But leaving means going back to the streets with nothing, and the streets are what drove you here in the first place. It's a trap. The workhouse offers just enough. Food, shelter, safety from the worst dangers, to make leaving feel impossible, but it extracts such a high cost that staying feels like dying slowly. You meet a girl named Sarah who's been in the workhouse for 3 years. She's 11 but looks younger, stunted from malnutrition and overwork. She tells you quietly, when the master isn't listening, that the workhouse is better than her home was. Her father beat her daily, her mother drank, and there was never food. At least here, she says, the beatings are predictable, the food is regular, the work is hard but not impossible. She's accepted this as the best her life will ever be, and the resignation in her voice is heartbreaking. The workhouse has rules for everything. When you wake, how you make your bed, how you line up for meals, how you address the master and the supervisors, where you walk, when you speak. The rules are designed to control every aspect of your existence, to remove any hint of individuality or independence. You're not a person anymore. You're an inmate in an institution that exists to extract labour while providing the absolute minimum to keep you alive. There are small rebellions, children who work slowly when the master isn't watching, whispered conversations in the dormitory after lights out, stolen moments of rest when you should be working. These tiny acts of resistance are all that keep some children human. They're dangerous. Punishment for disobedience is harsh, but they're necessary. Without them, you'd become like the dead-eyed older children who've forgotten how to hope. You spend weeks debating whether to go to the workhouse. You're hungry, cold, desperate. Winter is getting worse. You've lost weight you couldn't afford to lose. You're coughing constantly, and you're scared the cough means something serious. The workhouse would solve these problems. You'd be fed, sheltered, given a medical care of sorts. You might survive the winter instead of freezing in a doorway. But the cost, the loss of freedom, the brutal work, the beatings, the reduction of your entire existence to labour and obedience. Is survival worth it if you have to give up everything that makes you a person? Is it better to be a free orphan who might die, or a workhouse inmate who survives but loses their soul? Other orphans have different opinions. Thomas thinks the workhouse is worse than death. Better to die free on the streets than live enslaved in that building, he says. Greta disagrees. She'd go to the workhouse in a heartbeat if they'd take her. At least you'd survive winter, she argues. You can't be free if you're dead. Both have valid points, and you're caught between them, unable to decide. Eventually, you make a choice. Maybe you decide to try the workhouse, figuring survival is more important than freedom. Maybe you decide to stay on the streets, choosing liberty over security. There's no right answer. Both options involve suffering, both involve sacrifice. You're just choosing which kind of hell you want to endure. And that's the real tragedy of the workhouse. It exists as a solution to orphan homelessness, but it's not really a solution. It's just trading one kind of misery for another. The workhouse doesn't save children. It just exploits them in a more organised way, grinding them down until they're too used up to be useful anymore. The building stands there, stone and imposing, promising shelter and delivering servitude. And orphans like you stand outside its doors weighing impossible options, trying to decide which form of suffering is most bearable. Welcome to medieval social services. They're here to help. Whether you survive that help is another question entirely. Every once in a while, against all odds, someone is kind. A merchant's wife slips you a meat pie when her husband isn't looking. A farmer lets you sleep in his barn on the coldest night of the year. A widow leaves a bowl of soup on her doorstep, pretending she forgot it there, even though you both know she didn't. These moments are rare, fleeting, and impossibly precious. They don't erase the hunger, the cold, or the fear, but they remind you that not everyone has forgotten you exist. Not everyone has turned away. The first time someone is genuinely kind to you, it's so unexpected you almost don't recognise it. You're begging outside a baker's shop, giving your best pitiful orphan performance when the baker's wife comes out. You brace yourself for the usual, being chased away, maybe hit with a broom, told to stop bothering customers. Instead, she looks at you for a long moment, really looks at you, then disappears back inside. She returns with a small loaf of bread, still warm, and hands it to you without a word. No lecture, no conditions, no making you feel small for accepting charity. Just bread, freely given, and a look in her eyes that might be compassion or might be memory of her own hard times. You take the bread with shaking hands, mumble thank you, and practically run away before she can change her mind. 3 streets away you stop and eat the bread slowly, savouring every bite, and you cry a little. Not from hunger, though hunger is constant, but from the shock of being treated like a human being. Someone saw you and didn't look away. Someone helped without expecting anything in return. It's such a small thing, a piece of bread, but it feels monumental. These moments of kindness are unpredictable. You can't plan for them, can't rely on them, can't expect them. They just happen occasionally, like finding a coin in the street or discovering a doorway that blocks the wind perfectly. They're gifts from the universe or from people's better angels, rare enough to be remarkable, common enough to give you strange, stubborn hope. There's a widow named Mistress Eleanor who lives near the church. She's old, bent over from years of hard work, and not wealthy by any measure. But once a week on Wednesdays she leaves a bowl of soup on her doorstep. It's always there at the same time, always covered with a cloth, always still warm. She never watches to see who takes it, never makes a show of her charity. She just leaves it and goes back inside. You and other orphans know about it, take turns claiming the soup, and never abuse the privilege by stealing from her or bothering her for more. It's an unspoken agreement. She gives what she can, you take only what's offered, everyone pretends it's accidental. You've never spoken to Mistress Eleanor directly. You've never thanked her, never told her what those weekly bowls of soup mean. But you see her sometimes, through her window or walking to church, and you try to convey gratitude through eye contact alone. You hope she knows. You hope she understands that she's saving lives, one bowl at a time. A farmer once let you sleep in his barn. It was the coldest night of the year, snow falling so thick you could barely see, wind cutting through your inadequate clothes like knives. You were going to die that night. You knew it. Your body was shutting down, your thoughts getting fuzzy, your movements slowing. That's how freezing to death starts. You just get sleepy and stop caring. You stumbled toward a barn on the outskirts of town, just hoping to get out of the wind for a few minutes. The farmer found you there, half frozen, barely conscious. Instead of chasing you out or calling for authorities, he threw a horse blanket over you, brought you water, and let you stay the night. He didn't say much. Farmers aren't typically chatty, but his action said everything. In the morning he gave you a hunk of bread and cheese before sending you on your way. No judgment, no sermon about laziness or sin. Just basic human decency extended to a child who needed it desperately. You think about that farmer sometimes. Wonder if he knows he saved your life. Wonder if he even remembers you. Probably not. You were just another frozen orphan in a world full of them, but you remember him. You remember the scratchy warmth of that horse blanket, the relief of being inside walls, the impossible kindness of a stranger who had no reason to help but did anyway. There's a merchant who pretends not to notice when you steal from his cart. You know he notices, he's not stupid, and you're not that skilled a thief. But every few days, when you sneak an apple or a turnip from his produce, he's always conveniently distracted, always looking the other way, always giving you just enough time to grab something and disappear. It's a strange dance you do, this merchant and you. He maintains plausible deniability, you maintain the fiction of theft, and everyone gets what they need without the complication of official charity. One day you catch his eye right after taking an apple, and he gives you the smallest nod, acknowledgement, permission. An unspoken agreement that yes, he knows, and yes, it's okay. You nod back, a tiny gesture of gratitude, and the arrangement continues. It's not much. An apple every few days won't solve hunger or homelessness. But it's something. And sometimes something is enough to mean everything. Acts of kindness come in different forms. Sometimes it's food. Sometimes it's shelter. Sometimes it's just a kind word, someone acknowledging your existence in a positive way. A priest who says, "God bless you, child," and means it. A mother who lets you warm yourself by her cooking fire for a few minutes. A shopkeeper who doesn't chase you away when you're just standing near their store, not even begging, just existing in a warm spot. These people don't become your saviours. They don't adopt you or permanently change your circumstances. They're not going to solve the fundamental problem of being an orphan in medieval times, but they provide moments of relief, brief respites from the constant cruelty, reminders that humanity exists even in brutal times. You start to notice that kindness often comes from people who've suffered themselves. The wealthy merchants in their fine clothes walk past without seeing you. The nobles in their carriages don't acknowledge your existence. But the widow who's known hunger, the farmer who's worked until his body broke, the shopkeeper who remembers being poor, they're the ones who help. Suffering, it seems, creates either cruelty or compassion. These people chose compassion. There's a strange guilt that comes with kindness. When someone helps you, you feel grateful but also unworthy. Why you? Why not another orphan who needs help just as badly? Why not Thomas or Greta or little William? You haven't earned this kindness. You're not special. You're just lucky enough to be in the right place when someone's heart opens slightly. It feels unfair, even as you're desperately grateful for it. You try to pay kindness forward when you can, though opportunities are rare. When you find more food than you need, a miracle that happens maybe twice, you share it with other orphans. When you discover a good sleeping spot, you tell others about it. When you learn which merchants are tolerant or which guards are lazy, you spread that information. It's not much, but it's your version of the widow's soup bowl, the farmer's barn, the merchant's turned back. Small acts of kindness in an unkind world. Some people's kindness is complicated. They help, but they want you to know you're being helped. They give you bread while explaining how lazy and ungrateful orphans usually are. They offer shelter while reminding you how much trouble you are. The help is real, but it comes wrapped in judgment and superiority. You take it anyway because you have to, but it leaves a bitter taste. Kindness with strings attached isn't quite kindness, but when you're starving, you can't afford to be picky about the emotional packaging. The purest kindness is anonymous. Money left in spots where orphans sleep. Food appearing without explanation. A door left unlocked on a freezing night, allowing you to slip inside a warm building for a few hours. These benefactors never reveal themselves, never take credit, never expect gratitude. They just help and disappear. Modern-day angels in a medieval hell. You have no idea who they are or why they help, but their gifts are the most precious because they come with no complications, no expectations, no power dynamics, just pure, uncomplicated help. You wonder sometimes what makes people kind. What internal calculation leads someone to help when they could just as easily ignore you? Is it religion? Fear of divine judgment for turning away the needy? Is it memory? They remember being poor themselves? Is it just basic human decency? An instinct to help vulnerable children? You'll never know for sure. People rarely explain their kindness, and you're not in a position to interview them about their motivations. What you do know is that these moments of kindness keep you human. They prevent you from becoming completely cynical, completely hardened, completely convinced that the world is only cruelty and survival. They're proof that something good still exists, even here, even now. They're evidence that not everyone has forgotten that orphans are children, not problems or nuisances or invisible obstacles, but actual human beings deserving of basic compassion. You collect these kindnesses in your memory like treasures. The merchant's wife with the bread, the farmer with the barn, the widow with the soup, the priest who blessed you genuinely, the stranger who gave you a coin without being asked. Each one is a small light in a dark world, and you hold on to them when everything else feels hopeless. Because here's the thing about kindness in desperate times. It's not about the practical value, though that matters. It's about the message that you're worth helping, that your life has value, that someone somewhere gives a damn whether you live or die. In a world that treats you like human garbage, that message is everything. These strangers will never know what their small acts meant. They'll never know that a piece of bread or a night in a barn or a bowl of soup saved a life or at least saved a soul. They'll go about their lives, maybe forgetting about the dirty orphan child they helped that one time. But you won't forget. You can't forget. These moments are too precious, too rare, too important. So you keep them close, these memories of kindness. And on the worst days, when you're coldest and hungriest and most alone, you remember, not everyone is cruel. Not everyone has turned away. Someone somewhere was kind. And maybe, just maybe, someone will be kind again. Survival as a medieval orphan means learning to disappear. You learn to move through crowds without being noticed, to tuck yourself into corners where no one thinks to look, to lower your eyes and soften your footsteps so that guards and merchants pass you by. You become a ghost, a shadow, a thing so small and quiet that the world forgets you're there. It's lonely, it's exhausting, but it keeps you alive. Because the moment you're seen, really seen, you become a problem. And problems get solved. The first lesson in invisibility is posture. You learn to make yourself small, shoulders hunched, head down, body language screaming, "Please don't notice me." It's the opposite of how humans naturally want to carry themselves, Children should stand tall, look around with curiosity, take up space in the world. But you've learned that taking up space means attracting attention, and attention means danger, so you fold into yourself, becoming as compact and unnoticeable as possible. Your walk changes. Instead of the normal bouncing energy of childhood, you develop a shuffle. Quiet, unassuming, purposeful enough that you don't look suspicious, but not so purposeful that you seem like you're going somewhere important. You're aiming for belongs here, doing something boring. Just another anonymous person moving through the street. Nothing worth a second glance. It's harder than it sounds. Walking requires constant mental calibration. Not too fast, not too slow, not too confident, not too skulking. Eye contact is your enemy. In the social hierarchy of medieval life, eye contact is confrontational. It's a challenge, a demand to be acknowledged, a claim to equal standing. You can't afford any of those things, so you learn to look down, to the side, at the ground, at walls, anywhere except directly at people. You develop a kind of peripheral awareness, seeing everything while appearing to see nothing. It's like having a sixth sense, tracking threats and opportunities in your peripheral vision, while your direct gaze stays safely neutral and unthreatening. Silence becomes your default mode. You don't speak unless absolutely necessary. Every word is a risk. It makes you real, makes you present, makes you someone who has to be dealt with. The less you talk, the more you fade into background noise. When you do speak, you keep your voice soft, apologetic, deferential. Sorry, sir. Please, mistress. Beg your pardon. Words that make you smaller, less significant, less worthy of attention or anger. You learn the art of strategic positioning. In crowds, you stay in the middle, not at the edges where guards patrol, not at the front where merchants watch for thieves, just somewhere in the middle of the mass of humanity, one small body among dozens, impossible to distinguish or remember. In open spaces, you stick to walls, moving along the edges of plazas and markets rather than cutting through the centre. Walls provide cover, escape routes, and a psychological boundary that makes you seem more like architecture than person. Your clothing helps with invisibility, inadvertently. You're so dirty, so ragged, so thoroughly unremarkable that you blend into the general medieval poverty landscape. There are hundreds of people who look more or less like you, poor, unwashed, dressed in brownish-greyish rags. You're not distinctive, you're generic poverty, and people's eyes slide right over you because they've seen 1,000 versions of you already today. It's depressing, but useful. You develop timing strategies, learning when to be in certain places and when to avoid them. Market squares are safest during busy midday hours when you're one anonymous child among crowds, but they're dangerous during quiet morning or evening times when your presence becomes noticeable. Guard patrol patterns become familiar. You know which streets they walk, when they take breaks, when they're most alert and most lazy. You plan your movements around these patterns like a chess player planning moves. Doorways and corners become refuges, places where you can tuck yourself away and become part of the architecture. You learn which doorways are deep enough to provide concealment, which corners create blind spots, which alleys have multiple exits in case you need to run. Your mental map of the city includes layers of information, not just where things are, but where you can hide, where you can be unseen, where you can exist without being a problem. The ability to hold still is crucial. When guards pass, when merchants scan for thieves, when anyone threatening appears, you freeze, complete stillness, barely breathing, becoming a statue. Movement attracts the eye. It's how humans are wired, to notice motion. If you can eliminate motion, you eliminate much of your visibility. You've practiced this until you can hold perfectly still for minutes at a time. Your only movement, the slight rise and fall of your chest as you breathe as shallowly as possible. But invisibility is more than physical technique. It's psychological. You learn to suppress your personality, your wants, your very sense of self. Being invisible means being nobody. It means having no opinions, no desires, no identity beyond basic survival functions. The you that existed before your parents died, the child with preferences and dreams and a personality, has to be compressed down into something so small it doesn't register on the world's radar. This internal suppression is exhausting in ways that physical hiding isn't. It's one thing to crouch in a doorway. It's another thing to systematically erase yourself from your own consciousness, to become so practiced at being nobody that you start forgetting who you actually are. Sometimes you catch yourself feeling nothing, not sad, not scared, or not anything, and you realise that invisibility has leaked inward. You're not just invisible to others, you're becoming invisible to yourself. Other orphans are your teachers and fellow students in the School of Invisibility. You watch how the most successful ones move, how they position themselves, how they manage to exist in plain sight without being noticed. The ones who survive longest have mastered this art. The ones who die or get caught are usually the ones who couldn't quite manage it, who made eye contact at the wrong time, who moved too boldly, who forgot for one fatal moment to be invisible. There's a hierarchy of visibility that you learn to navigate. Wealthy nobles are maximally visible. They want to be seen, command attention, take up space. Merchants and tradespeople are moderately visible, present and accountable but not dominating. And then there's you, at the bottom, where visibility is survival risk and invisibility is survival strategy. You exist in a completely different world from the nobles, even though you're standing 10 feet away from them. They live in bright clarity. You live in shadow. Guards are trained to spot certain things: suspicious behaviour, obvious theft, violence. But they're not trained to see poverty. They've learned, like everyone else, to look right through the poor and homeless. This works in your favour as long as you don't do anything that breaks the pattern, that snaps you into focus. Stealing obviously, running suspiciously, looking directly at them, these things break invisibility and make you suddenly dangerously visible. Sometimes invisibility fails despite your best efforts. Someone sees you, really sees you, and you watch the recognition cross their face. They notice you're a child, alone, clearly orphaned. Their reaction varies. Some look away quickly, actively choosing not to see, re-establishing your invisibility through deliberate ignorance. Some show pity but don't act on it, their concern evaporating as quickly as it appeared. And some get angry, as if your visibility is an imposition, a rudeness you've committed by forcing them to acknowledge poverty exists. The loneliness of invisibility is profound. You're surrounded by people constantly. Medieval cities are crowded, noisy, packed with humanity, but you're utterly alone because nobody sees you. You could die right here in the middle of the market square and people would step over your body for hours before someone bothered to remove it. You're a ghost among the living, present, but not acknowledged, existing, but not mattering. Children especially struggle with forced invisibility because children naturally seek attention. They want to be seen, heard, acknowledged. The need for recognition is developmental, psychological, fundamental. But you've had to suppress that need so completely that it's created a kind of psychological damage you don't even have words for. You've taught yourself that being seen equals danger, that recognition equals punishment, that visibility equals vulnerability. These lessons will stay with you forever, even if circumstances change. There are moments when invisibility breaks, and it's not your fault. Someone bumps into you in a crowd and suddenly becomes aware you're there. A child your age looks directly at you and waves, innocent and friendly, forcing their parent to notice you too. A dog follows you through the streets, barking, drawing attention you desperately don't want. These moments of unwanted visibility send panic through your system. You're exposed, vulnerable, suddenly real to people who were safely ignoring you moments before. You've become so good at invisibility that sometimes you wonder if you've forgotten how to be visible. If circumstances changed, if someone wanted to help you, could you even accept it? Could you stand in front of a person, make eye contact, speak clearly, take up space, be present? Or have you trained yourself so thoroughly to disappear that you've lost the ability to appear? It's a disturbing thought that visits you during long, dark nights. The irony is that you're working so hard to be invisible while simultaneously desperate to be seen. Not by guards or merchants or anyone who might hurt you, but by someone who might help. Someone who might notice you're a child who needs care and actually do something about it. But that kind of seeing, the helpful kind, is so rare that you can't risk being visible and hoping. The dangerous kind of seeing is far more common, so you stay invisible and hope that somehow, impossibly, the right person will see through your invisibility to the child underneath. Mastering invisibility feels like both an achievement and a tragedy. You're proud of your skill, it keeps you alive after all. But you're also aware that you're 8 years old and you've become expert at erasing yourself from existence. That's not a skill children should need. That's not a life children should live. But it's the life you have, and invisibility is your survival tool, so you use it. Every day you practice. Every day you refine your technique. Every day you become a little better at being nobody, at existing without existing, at moving through the world like smoke. Present but intangible, there but not there. Because in the medieval world, for an orphan, visibility is death, and invisibility is life. And you've chosen life, even if it's a life spent in shadows. Being an orphan doesn't just mean you're poor or hungry or cold, it means you're vulnerable in ways that children with families aren't. There's no one to protect you, no one to stand between you and the world's cruelty. You're an easy target for anyone looking to exploit, abuse, or simply ignore a child in distress. Predators know this. They can spot an orphan from a mile away, the way you flinch at sudden movements, the way you keep your head down, the way you never quite make eye contact. And once they've spotted you, you're in danger. The vulnerability starts with the most basic fact. There's no one looking for you. If a child with parents goes missing, people search, questions are asked, authorities get involved. There's noise, concern, investigation. But if you disappear, who notices? Who cares? Other orphans might wonder where you went, but they're not in any position to do anything about it. The church might note your absence from their feeding programs, but they're not launching search parties. You could vanish completely and the world would simply continue, one less orphan cluttering up the streets. Predators understand this math perfectly. A child with family has connections, consequences, people who will come asking questions. An orphan has none of that. You're isolated, vulnerable, and disposable in ways that make you an ideal target for anyone with bad intentions. This isn't paranoia. This is medieval reality. The world is full of people who see vulnerable children as opportunities for exploitation, abuse, or worse. You learn to recognize danger in its various forms. There are the obvious predators, men who linger near where orphans sleep, who offer food or shelter with that particular tone that makes your skin crawl, who watch you with eyes that see you as prey rather than person. These men aren't subtle. Their danger radiates off them like heat from fire. Every orphan knows to avoid them, to run when they approach, to never, ever be alone with them. But danger also comes in less obvious packages. The merchant who offers you work but keeps finding reasons to touch you inappropriately. The priest who takes special interest in your spiritual welfare but only in private, locked rooms. The noble woman who wants to help by taking you into service but treats you more like property than person. These predators hide behind respectability, using their social position as camouflage for their intentions. You've had close calls. A man once followed you through the market, matching your turns, maintaining a consistent distance. Your heart pounded. You knew what was happening. You ducked into a crowded tavern, pushed through the patrons, slipped out a back door and ran until your lungs burned. You never saw him again, but the memory haunts you. How close were you to becoming another missing orphan nobody bothered to search for? The danger isn't always sexual or violent. Sometimes it's economic. People looking for free labour, for children they can exploit without consequence. They offer food and shelter. Sounds good, right? But once you're in their home or workshop, you're trapped. You work for no pay, under threat of being thrown back onto the streets or turned over to authorities. It's slavery with extra steps, and orphans fall into these traps constantly, because the alternative is freezing and starving. Other children warn you about specific people and places. Don't go to the tannery on Oak Street, the owner likes little boys. Avoid the inn near the North Gate. Girls who work there don't leave. Stay away from Brother Marcus at St. Stephen's, he's not safe. This information network is all you have, passed orphan to orphan in whispered warnings. There's no official system protecting you. You protect each other, when you can, with information. The vulnerability extends beyond predators. You're also defenseless against casual cruelty. Teenage boys who think it's funny to beat up orphans for entertainment. Drunk men looking for someone weaker to kick. Noble children who throw stones at you like you're a stray dog. There's no one to defend you. No adult to step in and say, leave that child alone. You're fair game for anyone's anger, boredom, or cruelty. You develop a constant state of hypervigilance that's exhausting to maintain. You're always scanning for threats, always calculating escape routes, always positioning yourself near exits. Your nervous system never relaxes because relaxation means vulnerability, and vulnerability means danger. You sleep lightly, wake at the smallest sound, stay ready to run at any moment. It's no way for a child to live, but it's the only way you know how to survive. Groups of orphans are safer than individuals, but only slightly. There's some protection in numbers. Predators prefer isolated targets, but groups of orphans also attract different kinds of attention. Guards see you as potential criminal gangs. Merchants see you as coordinated theft operations. You're damned if you're alone and damned if you're together, just in different ways. The worst thing about this constant danger is how it changes you. You become suspicious of everyone, even people who might genuinely want to help. That merchant's wife who offered you bread. Part of you is scanning for the trap, waiting for the moment when kindness reveals itself as manipulation. That farmer who let you sleep in his barn. You spent the whole night ready to run, unable to fully trust his generosity. Constant danger teaches you that trust is a luxury that gets you hurt or killed. You've learned to fight, sort of. Nothing formal, no one's teaching orphans self-defense techniques. But you've learned through necessity how to scratch, bite, kick, scream, and create enough chaos to maybe escape. You're not winning fights against adults. You're just making yourself difficult enough that predators might decide you're too much trouble and move on to easier prey. It's not much, but it's something. The danger is worse for girls. You're not a girl, but you see what they face. Additional layers of vulnerability, additional types of predators, additional dangers that boys don't face or face less frequently. Orphan girls travel in pairs when possible, share information about dangerous men obsessively, and develop even more elaborate safety strategies. Some disguise themselves as boys, binding their chests and cutting their hair, hoping male presentation offers even slight protection. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You're constantly aware that you're one bad moment away from catastrophe. One wrong turn into an alley with no exit. One miscalculation about who's trustworthy. One time being too slow to run. These mistakes are deadly, and you have no margin for error. Children with families can make mistakes and be protected, rescued, given second chances. You get one chance, and if you blow it, there's no safety net below you. The psychological damage of constant vulnerability is profound. You can't develop normally when you're always in survival mode. You can't learn to trust when trust is dangerous. You can't form healthy relationships when every relationship might be a trap. You can't relax into childhood when childhood is a luxury you can't afford. You're being shaped by trauma in ways that will affect you forever, if you survive long enough for forever to matter. Sometimes the danger comes from unexpected sources. A seemingly kind woman who offers you work but then locks you in her house, planning to sell you to someone worse. A guard who promises protection but demands payment in forms you don't want to give. A church official who talks about saving your soul but seems far more interested in your body. Evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it wears respectable clothing and speaks in gentle voices. You've learned to trust your instincts. That feeling in your gut when something's wrong, you've learned to listen to it immediately. Rational thought can be deceived, but your body knows danger before your mind processes it. When your skin prickles, when your heart rate increases, when every nerve screams run, you run. You don't wait to understand why. You don't give danger the chance to explain itself. You just go. The absence of protection means you're also vulnerable to false accusations. Someone's child goes missing. Maybe they ran away. Maybe something worse happened. But the town needs someone to blame. Who's an easy target? The orphans, of course. You've got no one to vouch for you. No alibi that matters. No social standing that protects you from suspicion. You could be hanged for crimes you didn't commit simply because you're convenient and disposable. Other orphans disappear regularly. Thomas vanished a few weeks ago. Greta hasn't been seen in days. Little William was there one morning and gone by afternoon. Each disappearance could be innocent. Maybe they found help. Maybe they moved to another part of the city. Maybe they just died of illness or cold. But maybe not. Maybe they encountered the wrong person in the wrong place and became another statistic that nobody's counting. The danger makes you angry sometimes. Underneath the fear, you're just a child. You should be protected, valued, kept safe. That's what childhood is supposed to be, a time when adults create safe space for you to grow. Instead, you're navigating a world designed to chew you up and spit you out, if it bothers to notice you at all. The unfairness of it burns in your chest, hot and bitter. But anger is another luxury you can't afford. Anger makes you reckless, makes you take stupid risks, makes you confront people when you should run. Anger gets orphans killed. So you swallow it down, compress it into something small and dense in your chest, and focus on the only thing that matters, surviving today so you have a chance at tomorrow. You dream sometimes of having someone, anyone, a parent, a guardian, an older sibling, even just a friend with more power than you have. Someone who could stand between you and danger, who could say, "Leave this child alone," and be heard. Someone whose presence would make predators think twice, would make your vulnerability slightly less absolute. But that person doesn't exist. You're on your own, and you have been since your parents died, and you will be until either circumstances change or you don't survive to see circumstances change. The worst moments are when you see children with families, children your age walking with parents who watch them protectively, children who don't flinch at sudden movements, children who make eye contact without fear. They live in a completely different world, one where adults protect instead of prey, where childhood is safe instead of survivable. You can't even imagine that world anymore. It's as foreign to you as the noble courts or distant kingdoms. That protected childhood isn't available to you, will never be available to you. So you stay alert, you stay cautious, you trust no one completely, you maintain your escape routes and your hypervigilance and your constant, exhausting awareness of every person who might be a threat. Because being alone means being vulnerable, and being vulnerable means being in danger, and being in danger means maybe not making it to tomorrow. And tomorrow is all you have, so you protect it the only way you can, by never, ever letting your guard down. When you can't afford fire and your body won't stop shivering, sometimes the only warmth comes from inside. You tell yourself stories, tales you heard from your mother before she died, legends whispered by other orphans in the night, fantasies you invent to escape the cold and the hunger and the fear. You sing under your breath, old folk songs that make you feel less alone. These stories and songs don't fill your belly. They don't stop the frost, but they fill the silence. And in a world that's constantly trying to break you, that's something. Your mother used to tell you stories before bed, back when there was a bed, when there was warmth, when there was a mother. You cling to these memories desperately, replaying them in your mind until you've worn grooves in your memory like water wearing grooves in stone. She told you about clever peasants who outwitted nobles, about magical creatures who lived in forests, about children who survived impossible odds through wit and courage. At the time, they were just stories. Now they feel like instructions, like she was preparing you for this life without meaning to. One story you remember perfectly. A poor woodcutter's daughter who got lost in the forest during winter. She was cold and scared, just like you are most nights. But she met a fox who gave her advice, and a bird who shared seeds, and eventually she found her way home. The story always ended with her safe by the fire, eating hot soup surrounded by family. You don't think much about the ending anymore. It's too painful, too impossible. But you think about the middle part, about the girl being resourceful and brave and surviving. That part feels relevant. You tell yourself new stories, fantasies where you're not an orphan. In these stories, a wealthy merchant discovers you're actually his long-lost child, taken by bandits as a baby and finally recovered. Or a kind noblewoman takes you in and raises you as her own. Or you find a purse of gold coins and use it to buy a cottage and never go hungry again. These stories are obvious escapism, and you know they're not real, but they help. They give you something to think about besides cold and hunger and fear. Other orphans tell stories too. On the coldest nights when you're all huddled together trying to survive until dawn, someone will start talking. Thomas once told a long rambling story about a kingdom under the sea where it was always warm and food grew on trees. Greta knows stories about saints who performed miracles, though her versions are less pious and more practical than the church versions, saints who gave orphans bread instead of blessings. Little William liked stories about animals that could talk and always helped lost children. The stories become communal entertainment and survival strategy combined. When someone's telling a story, you're not thinking about how cold you are. You're thinking about magical kingdoms and clever heroes and impossible solutions to terrible problems. The story creates a bubble of not quite warmth, a psychological shelter when physical shelter isn't available. You take turns being the storyteller, each of you contributing what little magic you can conjure from words. Songs are different from stories but serve similar purpose. Your mother sang to you, lullabies and folk songs and work songs she'd learned from her mother. You remember the melodies better than the words sometimes. You hum them under your breath when you're scared or lonely, which is most of the time. The tunes are simple, meant to be passed from generation to generation by people who couldn't read music or write it down, just melodies carried in memory and voice. There's one song about a bird who flies away in autumn and returns in spring. You sing it to yourself during winter, focusing on the return part, the promise that winter ends and warmth comes back. It's a children's song, simple and repetitive, but you don't care. It makes you feel connected to your mother, to your past, to a version of yourself that was loved and safe. Plus, singing uses breath, and breath creates tiny clouds of warmth. So there's even a physical component to it. Other orphans know songs too. Work songs from their parents' trades, drinking songs picked up from taverns, religious hymns learned at church. Sometimes you sing together, very quietly so as not to attract attention, creating thin harmonies that sound almost beautiful despite your raw, hungry voices. It's one of the few times you feel like you're creating something instead of just surviving. Music, even bad music sung by starving children, is still creation. The singing helps with pain too. When your feet hurt from walking on frozen ground, when your stomach cramps from hunger, when every part of your body is reporting some kind of misery, singing gives you something to focus on besides the pain. It's a mental trick, redirecting attention from suffering to melody. It doesn't make the pain go away, but it makes it slightly more bearable, like turning down the volume on your body's complaints. You make up songs sometimes, composing crude verses about your experiences. The merchant's bread, I saw it there. I grabbed it fast, he didn't care. They're not good songs. You're 8 years old and starving, not a trained bard, but they're yours. They document your life in ways no one else is documenting it. No scribe is writing down the orphan experience. No chronicler is recording your daily survival. So you do it yourself, in improvised verses that probably won't survive past your lifetime. Stories and songs also serve as currency in the orphan economy. Information is valuable, where to find food, which guards to avoid, but entertainment is valuable too. A good storyteller is welcome in any group of huddled orphans. Someone who knows lots of songs can buy their way into warm sleeping clusters. You're trading intangible goods, stories for companionship, songs for shared body heat. But the trades are real and sometimes life-saving. The narratives you create become survival tools in unexpected ways. When you're begging, you sometimes tell a story to potential donors, not about being an orphan, that's too depressing and makes people uncomfortable, but a story about needing to buy medicine for your sick grandmother, or needing coins to pay for your father's funeral, or being separated from your family and trying to get home. These stories are lies, mostly, but they're more effective than truth. People respond better to specific narratives than to general suffering. You also use stories to make sense of your situation. Why did your parents die? Why are you an orphan? Why does life include so much suffering? The real answers, disease, poverty, bad luck, are unsatisfying. So you create better stories. Maybe your parents were secretly important people and enemies killed them. Maybe you're being tested by fate and will eventually be rewarded for enduring hardship. Maybe there's a reason, a plan, a narrative arc that makes sense of the senseless. These stories aren't true, but they're more psychologically sustainable than nihilistic truth. Folk tales often feature characters who survive through cleverness rather than strength, which feels relevant to your situation. You're not strong, you're 8 and malnourished, but maybe you can be clever. The stories teach lessons disguised as entertainment. Trust your instincts. Be kind to those who help you. Watch for hidden opportunities. Never give up even when things seem impossible. These are useful lessons wrapped in enjoyable packaging. Religious stories are everywhere in medieval life and some of them resonate. stories about saints who endured suffering and were rewarded in heaven, stories about Jesus caring for the poor and the outcast, stories about miracles happening to those who kept faith. You're not sure you believe these stories. Your daily experience doesn't suggest God is particularly attentive to orphan welfare, but they offer hope, and hope is in short supply. Even doubted hope is better than no hope at all. The stories also connect you to larger human tradition. These tales have been told for generations, passed down from parent to child, shared around fires and in fields and during long winter nights. By telling them, you're part of that tradition. You're not just an orphan surviving day to day, you're a human being participating in the ancient practice of storytelling. It gives you a sense of dignity, of being part of something larger than your individual suffering. Music has similar connecting power. The songs you sing are the same songs your parents sang, and their parents before them, stretching back generations. When you hum your mother's lullaby, you're linked to her across death, connected through melody. It's a kind of immortality. These songs outlive individual people, carrying forward pieces of culture and memory and love. You're a custodian of these songs now, keeping them alive even as you struggle to keep yourself alive. Sometimes the stories and songs attract unexpected kindness. A merchant who overhears you singing might be reminded of his own childhood and feel moved to give you bread. A noble woman who hears you tell a story to other orphans might see intelligence and potential worth cultivating. The stories themselves don't fill your stomach, but they occasionally create conditions where filling your stomach becomes possible. The fantasies you create become more elaborate over time. You have a whole imaginary life where you're not an orphan but a merchant's child, with warm clothes and regular meals and a future that involves something other than daily survival. You know exactly what your imaginary house looks like, what you'd eat for breakfast, what your imaginary parents would say to you. This fantasy life is dangerous. It makes real life even harder by comparison, but you can't help maintaining it. It's your escape hatch, your mental refuge when reality is unbearable. Other orphans have similar fantasies, and sometimes you share them, building collective dreams. When I grow up and have money, starts many conversations. The dreams are usually modest by noble standards. A house with a fireplace, enough food, maybe learning a trade, not dying young. These aren't dreams of grandeur. They're dreams of basic security, of lives where survival isn't a constant question mark. The fact that even these modest dreams seem impossibly distant doesn't stop you from dreaming them. The stories and songs can't change your material circumstances. They can't make you warmer, feed you, or protect you from danger. But they change your internal experience of those circumstances. They give you brief respites from despair. They remind you that humans are more than just bodies that need food and warmth. Humans are also creatures of imagination, creativity, and meaning-making. And even in the worst conditions, even as an orphan freezing in a medieval winter, you're still human in that way. On the longest, coldest nights, when survival seems most unlikely, the stories and songs are what keep you going. Not hope exactly. Hope is too grand a word for what you're feeling. But something smaller and stubborner. The refusal to let the world reduce you entirely to suffering. You're cold, yes. You're hungry, yes. You're scared and alone and facing impossible odds, yes. But you're also the keeper of your mother's songs, the teller of stories, the creator of brief moments of beauty in an ugly world. And somehow, impossibly, that's enough to get you through another night. The law in medieval times is not your friend. It doesn't protect orphans. It criminalizes them. Begging? That's vagrancy. Stealing? That's theft. Sleeping in the wrong doorway? That's trespassing. Existing without a parent or guardian? Suspicious. You learn quickly to avoid guards, to duck into alleys when you see their uniforms, to run at the first sign of trouble. Because if you're caught, the punishment is harsh. Whippings, brandings, imprisonment, or being sent somewhere even worse than the streets. The law exists to protect property and order. You are neither. Guards are everywhere in medieval cities, or at least it feels that way when you're an orphan. They patrol the markets, stand at gates, wander through streets looking for anything, or anyone, that seems out of place. Their uniforms vary by city, but you learn to recognize them instantly. The particular way they carry themselves, the weapons at their sides, the authority in their movements. Your body has developed an almost instinctive response to the sight of guards. Heart rate increases, muscles tense, eyes scan for escape routes. It's like a rabbit spotting a wolf. You've memorized guard patrol patterns better than you've memorized anything else in your life. You know that the North Market has 2 guards who change shifts at noon. You know the Eastgate guard takes long breaks and drinks on duty. You know which streets have heavy patrol presence and which are mostly ignored. This information is survival data, as important as knowing where to find food or safe sleeping spots. Other orphans trade this information like currency. The new guard at the bridge is aggressive. Avoid until evening shift. The crime of existing is the most frustrating one. You're not always stealing or begging. Sometimes you're just there, standing in a doorway trying to stay out of the rain, sitting on a street corner resting your feet, moving through the market looking for dropped food. But guards don't see innocent orphan going about their survival. They see potential criminal, vagrant, troublemaker. Your mere presence is suspicious. You learn to keep moving, to never linger too long in one place, to always appear to be going somewhere even when you have nowhere to go. Vagrancy laws are specifically designed to criminalize poverty. The logic, such as it is, goes like this. If you're not working and you're not a child with a guardian, you must be up to no good. Never mind that there are no jobs for 8-year-old orphans. Never mind that you'd work if anyone would hire you. Never mind that you're literally just trying not to die. The law sees you as a social problem that needs to be removed, not a child that needs to be helped. Running from guards is an acquired skill, and you've gotten unfortunately good at it. You know which alleys are too narrow for adult men in armour to follow quickly. You know which market stalls have spaces underneath where you can crawl and hide. You know how to climb walls using footholds that aren't obvious to people not desperately looking for them. You've practiced running in your inadequate footwear until you can move fast even on frozen slippery cobblestones. But running only works if you see them in time. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes a guard rounds a corner unexpectedly, or you're too focused on begging to notice their approach, or you're too weak from hunger to react quickly enough. That's when you're caught, and being caught is terrifying. The guard's hand clamps down on your shoulder, impossibly strong, inescapable, and your stomach drops as you realise you're not getting away this time. What happens next depends entirely on which guard caught you and what mood they're in. Some guards are relatively merciful. They'll rough you up a bit, maybe cuff you across the head, then shove you away with a warning to stay out of their district. These are the best-case scenarios. You take your bruises gratefully and run before they change their minds. Other guards are worse. They drag you to the local constable or magistrate, which means official punishment rather than unofficial violence. The punishments are designed to be public and humiliating. The stocks are common. Your hands and head locked into wooden boards in the town square while people walk by. Some ignore you. Some throw things. Rotten vegetables if you're lucky. Rocks if you're not. Some spit on you. You're displayed like a warning. This is what happens to vagrants and thieves. Resist the urge to mouth off or cry. Showing emotion makes it worse. You endure the hours, then escape as soon as you're released, usually under cover of darkness. Whippings are worse. You're tied to a post and beaten with a rod or whip, usually in public. The number of lashes depends on your crime and the magistrate's mood. 5 for begging, 10 for minor theft. 20 for repeat offences. Each strike feels like fire across your back. You try not to scream. It's a point of pride among orphans, not giving them the satisfaction. But eventually pain wins and you can't help it. The wounds take weeks to heal, and during that time you can't sleep on your back, can't move without pain, can't do anything except survive and hope infection doesn't set in. Branding is the nightmare scenario. A hot iron pressed into your skin, marking you permanently as a criminal, usually on the hand or forehead, somewhere visible so everyone knows what you are. The smell of your own burning flesh, the unimaginable pain, the permanent disfigurement. It's a punishment designed to mark you for life. You've seen orphans who've been branded, and they're even more desperate than before because now they're visibly marked as criminals, making survival even harder. Prison is another option, though it's almost worse than physical punishment. Medieval prisons are holes in the ground or cells in castle basements, dark and freezing and overcrowded. You're thrown in with actual criminals, thieves, murderers, people awaiting execution. There's no food provided, no sanitation, nothing. If you have family, they might bring food. You don't have family. So you either starve or beg from other prisoners, which rarely works because everyone's starving. Orphans sometimes die in prison, forgotten by everyone except the other orphans who notice they're gone. The law makes no distinction between children and adults when it comes to punishment. 8 years old? Too bad. You committed a crime, or something that counts as a crime, and you'll be punished the same as anyone else. There's no juvenile justice system, no consideration of circumstances, no recognition that you're stealing bread because you're literally starving. The law sees only the crime, not the human desperation behind it. Some guards are worse than the law itself. They see orphans as sport, as entertainment, as something to chase and terrorize for fun. You've been chased by guards who are laughing, clearly enjoying themselves, treating your terror as a game. You've seen guards kick orphans just for being nearby, hit them with sticks for the crime of existing. These aren't official punishments. These are just cruel people with power exercising that power on the most vulnerable targets available. You learn to identify the dangerous guards by reputation and appearance. Guard Thomas at the West Market is known for breaking orphans' fingers as informal punishment. Guard William near the cathedral takes bribes, which means if you ever somehow get money, you can pay him to look the other way. Guard Robert at the South Gate is fair, relatively speaking. He'll chase you, but if he catches you, he'll just confiscate stolen goods and let you go with a warning. This knowledge is constantly updated and shared among orphan networks. False accusations are another danger. Something goes missing from a shop, and the merchant immediately blames the nearest orphan. Doesn't matter if you were nowhere near when the theft occurred. Doesn't matter if you have an alibi. You're the convenient scapegoat, the obvious suspect, the person with no one to defend them. You've been accused of thefts you didn't commit more times than you can count. Sometimes you can prove your innocence, sometimes you can't. Either way, the accusation sticks, adding to your reputation as a criminal even when you're innocent. The legal system is supposed to provide justice, but justice requires money. You need money to hire someone to speak for you. You need money to provide bail. You need money to pay fines instead of taking physical punishment. You have no money, which means you have no access to justice. The law isn't designed to help people like you. It's designed to keep people like you in your place, to punish you for the crime of being poor and parentless. Some orphans try to work within the system, presenting themselves at churches or workhouses, essentially turning themselves into institutions that might provide care. Sometimes this works. More often, it leads to the same exploitation and punishment, but with a more official veneer. At least on the streets, you're free to run. In an institution, you're trapped, subject to whatever rules and punishments the people in charge decide to impose. You've become expert at reading situations, knowing when to run, and when running would make things worse. Sometimes the best strategy is to stand still, look innocent, and pray the guard's attention moves elsewhere. Sometimes it's to bolt immediately and not look back. Sometimes it's to blend into a crowd and become invisible. Each situation requires split-second assessment and decision-making, and getting it wrong can mean capture, punishment, or worse. The worst part is how the law makes you complicit in your own oppression. You can't report crimes against you because you're already a criminal in the eyes of the law. Someone robs you? Too bad. You probably stole whatever they took anyway. Someone beats you? Probably your fault for being where you shouldn't be. Someone tries to hurt you in worse ways. The law isn't interested in protecting orphans from predators. The law is interested in protecting property and order, and you are neither. You see the irony constantly. The law punishes you for stealing bread while ignoring nobles who steal entire harvests through taxes and tithes. The law criminalizes you for sleeping in doorways while nobles maintain empty houses for occasional visits. The law sees your survival as criminal while treating the structural violence that created your situation as natural and acceptable. You're 8 years old, and you already understand that the law isn't about justice. It's about protecting the interests of people who have property and power. You have neither, so the law is your enemy. Other orphans have been permanently damaged by encounters with the law. You know kids missing fingers from punishments, kids with brands marking them as thieves, kids who limp from beatings that broke bones that never healed properly. These injuries are constant reminders of what happens when you're caught, when you fail to run fast enough, when the law decides to make an example of you. Each scarred orphan is a walking warning to the rest of you. You fantasize sometimes about a different legal system. One that sees you as a child needing help rather than a criminal needing punishment. One that provides services instead of violence. One that asks, why is this child stealing bread? Instead of just punishing the theft. But that's fantasy. The reality is guards to avoid, laws to break for survival, and constant vigilance to stay ahead of a system designed to grind you down. So you run, you hide, you memorize patrol patterns and guard personalities and safe routes through the city. You become expert at the geography of escape, knowing every alley, every doorway, every wall low enough to climb. Because the law isn't protecting you, the law is hunting you. And survival means staying just out of reach. So, you've survived. Against impossible odds, you made it through another day as a medieval orphan. You woke up freezing in a doorway. You begged for scraps. You stole what you had to steal. You hid from guards. You endured hunger that gnawed at your insides like a living thing. You survived cold that tried to kill you every single night. You avoided predators, both human and otherwise. You stayed invisible when you needed to disappear, and visible just long enough to get help. You made it through another winter day when so many others didn't. And here's the thing that's easy to forget from our comfortable distance. You did this at 8 years old. 8. An age when modern children are learning multiplication tables, playing with friends, complaining about bedtimes. You were navigating a survival situation that would break most adults. You were making life or death decisions multiple times per day. You were developing skills and resilience that no child should ever need. The medieval orphans who lived this life, and there were thousands of them, tens of thousands, nameless children scattered across Europe's cities, weren't special or superhuman. They were just kids trying not to die. Some survived through luck, some through cleverness, some through sheer stubborn refusal to give up, and many, too many, didn't survive at all. They froze in doorways. They starved slowly. They succumbed to disease or violence or simple exhaustion. They disappeared without record, without memorial, without anyone bothering to count them among the dead. But the ones who survived, the ones who made it through childhood and into adulthood, carrying scars both visible and invisible, they were remarkable. Not because they were born special, but because they became resilient through necessity. They learned skills that kept them alive, how to read people, how to find food in impossible places, how to endure pain without breaking, how to maintain hope in hopeless circumstances. These weren't gifts. They were hard-won survival strategies paid for with hunger, cold, fear, and loss. And their legacy is still with us. Every person alive today had ancestors who survived impossible circumstances. Maybe not medieval orphanhood specifically, but something. Famine, war, plague, poverty, displacement. Humanity's family tree is full of people who endured suffering we can barely imagine, and somehow kept going anyway. That resilience is in you, too. It's in all of us, inherited across generations, a stubborn refusal to let the world destroy us. So tonight, as you settle into your bed, your warm, comfortable, soft bed with clean sheets and pillows, maybe take a moment to appreciate what you have. Not in some abstract way, but really appreciate it. You have shelter that actually shelters, food that you didn't have to beg, steal, or scavenge from garbage, water that won't kill you, heat that comes from a thermostat, not a desperately maintained fire, medical care for when you're sick, laws that at least theoretically protect you rather than criminalize your existence. You have a childhood, if you're young enough, or you had one, if you're older. A childhood that included play, safety, education, rest. Things medieval orphans never experienced. You were allowed to be a child in ways they never were, and if you have children, you get to protect them from the kind of suffering that was once just normal, expected. The default human experience for anyone born into poverty. The medieval orphans weren't tragic figures in a distant story. They were real children with thoughts and feelings and dreams and fears. They wanted the same things children have always wanted. Safety, warmth, food, love, a future. They just lived in a time and place that couldn't or wouldn't provide those things. Their suffering wasn't noble or character building or part of some grand plan. It was just suffering, the result of a society that valued property over people and order over compassion. But they survived anyway. The ones who made it survived. And they had children who survived. And those children had children. generation after generation, slowly, painfully, building toward a world where fewer children freeze in doorways, where fewer children starve while surrounded by food, where fewer children have to become invisible to stay alive. We're not there yet. There are still orphans, still homeless children, still kids surviving impossible circumstances, but we're closer than we were in 1320. And that progress exists because of the thousands of unnamed orphans who endured, who survived, who refused to let medieval cruelty have the final word. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, warm and safe and fed, remember them. The children in doorways, the ones who told stories to stay sane, the ones who shared body heat to survive, the ones who stole bread and felt guilty and did it anyway because hunger is stronger than morality, the ones who made it and the ones who didn't. Remember them not with pity, they wouldn't want pity. Remember them with respect. With gratitude for their resilience, with appreciation for how far humanity has come, and with determination to keep moving forward, to keep building a world where no child has to survive the way they survived. Because their struggle wasn't in vain. Their survival meant something. It meant you. It meant all of us. It meant the possibility of better. And that possibility, hard-won across centuries of suffering, is what lets you close your eyes tonight without fear. Sleep well, stay warm, and maybe, just maybe, say a quiet thank you to the orphans who didn't get that luxury but fought for survival anyway. They're the reason you're here, and they deserve to be remembered. Good night.